Okay, this is episode 20 of OverSight. We're into stage 2 of season 1. Like, fucking hell, what is this, like season 1, episode 0 or 2 or something? So we're here, usual host, Thorin, co-host, Monte Cristo, and the person who's our guest for this episode, right, is going to be Super from the San Francisco Shock. And by the way, if anyone's wondering, like, I am waiting for some, like, an anesthetic to wear off on my mouth. That's not the reason why I'm not talking about it. I haven't had my grill, like, jaw, you know, wired up like my personal hero Kanye West after he had that horrific car accident. You know, I'm not that eager to. I just wear his shoes. That's all. So our guest for this episode, Super, is the flex tank of the San Francisco Shock, and he is not allowed to play in the Overwatch until stage 3. So not now, not stage 2. Now I know you're already thinking, like, fucking hell, what must he have done? What is this, like one of those SADO/XQC? Fucking hell, stage 3. He must be. This guy's dangerous. But actually, he's just not old enough. He just wasn't born early enough in the lifespan of this play. He was born too late to play in the first 2 stages of Overwatch, but just early enough to enjoy the memes. So, welcome to the show, Super. You also
he was born too early to help his team actually get wins, and too late to save their season to help them get to the playoffs.
Yeah. So. To be fair, they might have been a better team if they'd have had wins in there with some of the shot calling. Oh wait, you mean to get wins in the game? Right? They haven't got that either, so you're right. Yeah. So okay. Also, actually, with those eyebrows, does look a little bit like fucking hell. The resemblance. What were you doing about 17 years ago, Monty? You weren't in some sort of other area of the United States. It's uncanny, but anyway. Yeah.
I actually am old enough to be his dad.
It is. That's disturbing, isn't it? Right. Okay.
Thorin, you are 2 times his age.
Oh, jeez.
Not bad. Okay. So, let's start here, Super. So usually we like to know a bit about people's teams, and obviously you should have quite a unique insight in that sense because you watched the team, presumably you played with them some, but you haven't actually played the official matches yet. So first of all, tell us about that then. What's the situation? Because if someone hears you can't play until stage 3, someone might think, oh, maybe you don't even go to the team house, maybe you're just back home and they bring you in later. But you're actually there and you've been able to go in and play with the team, presumably, right?
Yeah, so most of the teams play at the Blizzard facility, the Burbank Studios. That's where all the teams are. They're hosted. They play there. They'll have like a specific room with a bunch of computers, coaches. It's all LAN servers when we scrim on. So I get to, similar to a coach, I guess. You can sit the spectator. You can watch the scrims. Specific players give feedback. So it's almost like you have me as a player coach when I'm there at the moment.
When you say player coach, in what sense do you coach?
I mean, I give more individual feedback on players from mistakes I see.
The people who play your position, or just generally?
Just in general, yeah. I like to see what mistakes they make, and hopefully I can help them correct that.
Does that go down okay? I mean, if I was like a professional doing my job and like 17-year-old kid was like, hey, you might want to do that differently, I'd be like, yeah, that might trigger me a bit. I can't lie.
No, I think everyone's pretty accepting to criticism. They realize that it's a team game. Everyone's trying to get better. They're all towards the same goal. So,
okay. And what about then this whole scenario? Because obviously, what makes your addition to the team interesting is that your team hasn't been that great in the first stage, and everyone's assumption is, of course, they're going to want to put you and Sinatra in as soon as you're both of age. So, how much do they mix in actually using you to play now, and then just how much are you just sitting back watching them practice for the Overwatch League?
So I've been getting more scrim time recently because obviously it's getting closer to the point where I'm going to play. But earlier on, it was mostly just them because obviously they needed to start scrimming and get ready for the inaugural stage. And but more recently, I've been starting to actually start scrimming.
So when you say actually start scrimming, so the story of Super, for those who don't know it, was you used to play on a team called LG Evil, and you were the main tank of the team called LG Evil, and you played with such people like Jake on this team. And then you got signed by the San Francisco Shock, and you have now come to a point where it seemed like, from what we saw from the limited announcements of the team, that you would be playing flex tank. So, but then the Shock picked up Nevix, and Nevix has been doing pretty well. So what when you say you've been scrimming with the team, what position are you actually playing?
Well, it's not just been one. I think we're still attempting to figure out where exactly they want me to fit in. So it's not undecided. It's not decided yet.
Okay.
But we'll figure that out soon.
Does that mean then that, as people play in the main starting lineup, that essentially you're there to motivate them by the fact that, like, if they don't play their role well, you're just flexing onto that?
I suppose, yeah.
Okay. You're the enforcer. You're literally flexing on them. Like, listen, if they keep shit in line, I play your role too. Okay.
So I assume, you've been playing some main tank, I assume, and some flex tank. Have you been playing any support at all for your team?
No, those are the two positions.
Okay. So TBD as to which position you will actually be playing in.
Right.
Okay. Right. So in the first season, I have to say, with everyone we had on the show, I don't think I ever saw anyone who actually picked like Shock to be like a top team. And I think almost every episode we had people on, most people kind of wrote them off a bit and just thought that at best they'd be
that's not true. When we had Ark and Muma on, they said that they were surprised that San Francisco wasn't doing better because they performed very well in scrims.
Okay, my mistake. Apparently, for everyone who can only watch the official games, San Francisco Shock was not a good team. But apparently in private, like as long as all the cameras are off and no one's watching and everyone closes their eyes and crosses their fingers, then they're a really good team. But aside from that, in reality where I live, they weren't doing that well. So what do you think the flaws were? What were the problems, Super, last stage?
I think a lot of it is many of these players haven't played on a big stage before. I mean, obviously Nevix has won 2 Overwatch lands. He won DreamHack and he won the Overwatch Open.
Yes.
But when it comes down to Dante and Nomi and Sleepy, and I don't think they played exceptionally bad, but there were definitely improvements that could be made. It just comes down. I think a lot of it was land nerves. They're playing on a big stage for the first time, something new in esports, the Overwatch League. So I think that was part of it. And still trying. And well, they were still trying to mesh together. And not mesh together, but figure out a proper communication system, which I think has vastly improved since the first week of Overwatch League. So I'm happy to see that.
Okay. What do you think, Monty, were the things plaguing Shock overall in the first stage?
I think the Mercy meta hurt them because Dak was not very good at dealing with the Mercy himself, and he was dying a lot first in a lot of the team fights. I think that Dante has improved significantly, actually, over the course of Overwatch League and is now doing some very good stuff. And I'm liking more what he does now. When we started the preseason, he was making a lot of positional errors, and that has died down considerably. So I think previously they lacked a second DPS threat, which I think is sort of coming around now. I don't know. I don't think they have the greatest compositional versatility, especially from the DPS, because they're reliant on 2 basically hit scan players, and Babybay's Genji is not as good as other Genjis in the league, so there's sort of a limitation there. I think Babybay has been great on Soldier, Widow, long range hit scan. McCree has been fine, but I think they lack like a really good projectile player, which has been an issue. I think that probably an upgrade at main tank is needed from the side of Nomi, who hasn't been bad, but has been pretty average, I would say, although he was playing better against the Gladiators. And I think in terms of communication, the thing that's stuck with me the most is even when the Shock looked like they were doing well. So, for example, they'd be holding a point and they'd be playing defense, and it would come down to overtime. And the attacking team would make one final push into them, and then everything would fall apart for no reason. Like, it looked like the communication was just going insane, and whenever there was a hard push from an enemy team, they would just fall apart internally. So you'd see them hold, and then at the end, the last possible moment, they would just collapse. And I didn't really understand why that was happening.
Okay. Did you have what was the shot calling setup like in Shock? Can you give us any insight into that?
So a lot of it in the first stage was Babybay and Dak. They did a lot of calling, but the way that system worked, it didn't exactly fit to the way that our players are used to playing. So we decided to switch it around a bit, and now we get everyone is involved in the comms more. Sleepy and Dante specifically, they're really starting to add to the comms, which I think makes a big difference. If you saw our match versus Seoul, I think the first two maps were really close. I think we actually should have won Lijiang. That was more of a choke on our part. Like a Trancing Zen, Jaehong did some Mirror's Edge, and he jumped across the gap with his trance and touched the point. And they managed to win that fight, which I think should have been a one fight by us. So I think we should have gone up 2-0, ended up being 1-1. But those two maps were really close. Obviously, Gibraltar wasn't that great of a showing from us, but overall, I think there's pretty clear signs of improvement.
Okay.
Even at the end of stage one, last stage, because we played Seoul as our final match, and we took them to Game 5. So I think it goes to show you that there are improvements as the season goes on.
Okay. Right, he was referring there, Monty, to Mirror's Edge, a video game that the young people play. Not Miro's Edge, in case you perhaps thought confused why he was talking about the...
Well, Miro lost his edge, so...
Exactly, yes. No one's found that. That's not going to be seen in Overwatch League, so easy mistake to make, right? Okay, so let's talk about the first games then, because obviously San Francisco lost both games. Okay, one was to Seoul, fair enough, as you mentioned. That wasn't like a total blowout. They won a game. But the game against Gladiators, getting 4-0'd by them. Like Gladiators was a team that a lot of people by the end of last stage had massively gone off, thought they were pretty bad. They did add Fisher, admittedly. Which thing was he on? Spitfire, I think, right? They added Fisher in. What do you make of that game? Well,
I think a lot of the maps that we played weren't exactly our strongest in that match. We played Hanamura, which we actually won against Seoul, but I think we didn't really execute our game plan that well also, because we kind of, if you watch back the first point on Hanamura, I remember there was a dive onto our back line where like the Winston kind of was uncontested and he should have been a lot more poked out. He shouldn't have been able to get in for as free as he did. So when it comes down to that match, I think we needed to focus on our game plan better and maybe do some adjusting mid-game as well.
Okay, so Monty, since they're not going to have either of these other two players, Super or Sinatra, for this portion, like as far as I know, I think Sinatra technically would be available for like the playoffs, maybe. I think it's like the end of March, right?
The last week of stage 2 is when Sinatra.
So even to use him would be something of a gamble anyway. Is the loss to Gladiators? I mean, have they improved enough that Gladiators is okay to lose to them? It doesn't really sound like it, right?
I don't think Gladiators is going to be. I think that obviously they've made some pretty big improvements with Fisher, but so far what we've seen is that's come at the cost of some of their team synergy. And I think what San Francisco did well was try and identify that and pick off Shaz in these engagements. But I don't think the tank line played particularly well against, because I was casting that game against the Gladiators from the Shock's perspective. And even though they were getting picks on the support, it was pretty equaled, and Fisher was going off that game and basically just, killing all their supports as well. So I don't know. I think the Gladiators in the short term may struggle, but in the long term should be stronger, but not by a huge amount. Obviously, they only traded out one player and they still have some issues with finding the proper DPS to create big performances. When you say, though, going back to what you said about your maps, when you say that San Francisco is not strong on these maps, I think Hanamura, I've seen it both games with Gladiators and with Seoul now, and I think that looked pretty good for you guys. So are you saying that Hollywood and Route 66 are the maps that you like,
Route
as opposed
66,
to Kings Row and Gibraltar?
Yeah, Kings Row, we've been having some issues on, but we recently have been working on it in scrims with a few teams, and we think we found a defense and offense that more fits our play style. Obviously, I'm not gonna say what that is.
Well, one of the issues is like you guys don't have a top tier Zarya player until you get Sinatra in the lineup, and Kings Row is a map that really does reward Zarya play. So I can understand that. I guess my question too is with Dante's improvement, having Sinatra come in doesn't necessarily seem like it's that big of a thing for you guys. Like it's not like Dante has been playing poorly recently. Maybe in terms of giving you more options with the Zarya, it makes sense. But that's not like the biggest need that I see for you as a team. So I guess I think what you guys need to do is, obviously with you coming in and maybe taking over the main tank role, that would be more of an immediate upgrade, potentially at a need position. But the problem is like you also need some more depth, I think, to your supports, and you need a true projectile DPS player. So the signing window is still open throughout stage 2. So these are the things that would be nice to have additional players.
Right. Yeah. I think the big issue when it comes to, or not the big issue, but the biggest difference when it comes to Dante versus Sinatra is their playstyle. I think Sinatra is universally accepted as a very aggressive tracer. He likes to be in all the time. Whereas Dante likes to play a little bit more, he likes to wait a little bit longer, wait for the tanks to engage, and then he goes in, or maybe he'll go for an aggressive pulse bomb. But whereas Sinatra, he's, catch me in the spawn door with my boy on Tracer. He's always ready to spawn camp, always ready to go. So I think that's the difference between those two. I think when it comes to projectile, Bebe Sfera, I think, was better than most people expected. I mean, I don't think I'm not going to say he's like a Fleta level Pharah. Fleta's obviously probably the best Pharah, maybe. But I think he performed well enough, especially in when it comes to Pharah 1v1s. He really, I think, did well. And when it comes to Genji, I think we need to figure out how to utilize Baby's strengths because usually he plays the Genji, and he likes to be a little more aggressive, and then there's no that's not communicated to our tanks. So if we get that ironed out, I think there'll be vast improvements in those areas.
Maybe make it the Beyblade meta in that sense. If he scores enough, not bad. It was all right. That's like a 5 out of 10 point.
The baby Beyblade.
Exactly. Yeah. The new comp. Everyone. Well, one team can run it technically. Okay. Here's the question, Monty. Right. Awkward as it may be to get someone young, with a whole future ahead of them, and basically tell them as their team 0 and 2. Right. The part that's disturbing about Shock to me is to lose like that to Gladiators. There's so many teams in the league actually did make additions to their team and did upgrade and did get other options in the team. And obviously this squad is waiting to try these other 2 players out, and they've got to wait through this one. It's going to be a rough season for them, right, Monty?
I think that from talking to San Francisco's management that they had it, they couldn't know that for sure, but the goal of this team was always to build for the long term around the younger players. So I think that the expectations for season 1 were not there because they knew that guys like Super and Sinatra were going to be available only halfway through the season. And so it was more of a get everything rolling, sign these players early, and then move forward into season 2 with using the rest of this season for more experience. Now, it's not like they said that directly to me, but you can infer that based on the way that they're building out this roster.
Okay, right. Then let's talk about some of the other teams in the league. So let's start here. So Super, the team obviously that won the league was the London Spitfire. And they started out losing to the Houston Outlaws, who admittedly, made a few changes, and beating the New York Excelsior. Again, the team that they obviously beat in the final. What do you make of London Spitfire in stage 2?
So I still think New York is the best team in the league right now. I know they beat London, or London beat New York even after London had played 14 games that day. So obviously very impressive from London to show that type of stamina when it comes to long game days. I know how hard it can be, but I think London is still a strong team. But I just think the way that Jonak on New York, I think is the best flex support in the game right now, and he does things that almost no flex support can do. And the way they peel for him is almost unmatched. He's protected like a president. You can't really get to him. But I still think London will be in the running. I'm not saying they're out of it. Obviously, they have incredible players like Gesture, and they have Birdring, and so I think London can still definitely give New York a run for their money. And I do think it is a weaker meta for New York, because last meta they had Mercy, who was able to pocket Jonak, and they put every resource into him, and it was very easier to keep him alive than I would say in current meta with Lucio, because obviously you don't get that healing. You get the speed back, which might be able to help you disengage, but the big thing was that they gave him the mercy pocket, and he was not able to really get punished unless it was like an insta kill, pulse bomb, Winston off map, Diva nuke, things like that. So,
well, also he was just dealing more damage too.
Right, that too. Yeah.
Yeah, which gave him his trance faster and everything like that. So right. I do think I agree that this is potentially problematic for them, but I also think New York has enough other threats. To go back to London, I think that we had a situation where we had a bunch of rematches this week from week 5. So, for example, London and Houston played in week 5 of stage 1 and then in week 1 of stage 2. Yeah. And they won both times. Houston did win both times. But also you have to consider the fact that they also played New York both of those weeks. And if I had to guess, I would say that a lot of the preparation that London was doing probably went to New York and not to Houston. And when London played Houston in the actual stage playoffs, when it really mattered, they won pretty convincingly. Like we had two very close matches between Houston and London just for regular games. But the most lopsided win out of any of those 3 series, even though London only won 1 of the 3, was London in the stage playoffs. Yeah. So I feel very weird things about London. So, for example, in the last win that Houston had, in a great anti-dive meta with the Mercy and the Junkrat and the Widowmaker, London played basically Tracer Genji dive on attack and defense constantly in that series. And I was literally sitting next to Jack in the audience, the owner of Cloud9, being like, I have no idea why they are doing this. Last week they were playing a bunch of Junkrat. Why can't they just play Junkrat on defense? And then that same week when they hit Houston again, that's exactly what they did, and they won. So sometimes I feel like London is being stubborn and just sticking to a comp for an entire series, even if they're losing. They just won't make those changes. And then the other thing is, like, they seem to be more motivated in certain matches rather than others, which I find very interesting. Like I said, they really got it together for the matches in the stage playoffs, even though they've dropped more maps than some of the other all-Korean rosters. And also sometimes their use of players confuses me. For example, Bedosian was playing very well towards the end of stage 1, and then all of a sudden Hagapun is in for stage 2, week 1. And I literally don't even understand why you would do that. So
yeah, I think they only used Bedosian for like 1 game in the other series, right? In the New York series or something.
Yeah, maybe it's because they feel like Hagapun is a better Sombra player, but even they're playing him on the non-Sombra maps as well. So they're probably okay. The best reason that they probably have for doing this is that they're running Closer, and Closer and Hagapun played together on GC Busan, so they figure they have better chemistry. And the thing about when the construction of, this is a very long answer, when the construction of the Spitfire came together, remember that they only got 4 players from Kongdu. Yes. And one of the players they did not get was the Lucio player Waka Waka. So they actually got 2 flex supports, Bedosian and Nuss. So Nuss, so they only have 1 Lucio player on this team, is what I'm saying, and that Lucio player is Closer. So maybe they were going for the Closer Hagapun synergy, but I just think Bedosian's a better player right now. So it was an interesting experiment, but I'm not sure if that's going to be what we see in week 2.
Okay. Right. So you said there, Super, that you still think New York is the best team in the league. What hasn't London shown you then? What does London lack that would stop them from being the #1 team? I mean, obviously they won the first stage. Now they beat New York again. So what? Well,
they beat New York when Mono was playing Lucio. Like there's a lot of we saw New York this week, but they did not have Arc at all because he had a wrist injury apparently. Sure.
Okay.
And they don't have a backup Lucio player, so it had to go to one of their tanks. So not only did their better tank, they didn't have their best tank. Mono is the best tank on that roster, but they also had that best tank playing a support position.
Obviously, when Ark had to stop playing just Mercy only, he found out that actually, like, he had to use his wrist. He was like, "Fuck, that hurts!" Oh. It turns out he was injured the whole time. He was injured the whole time, and he only found out, fucking hell. Right? Okay, so Super. Anyway, the original question: what separates the two for you then?
I think both teams have really good coordination, but the way I saw them and experienced it myself, the way they make space for Jonak and the way they kept him alive. Granted, I don't know if it'll be as easy or if they'll be able to do it as well without Mercy, because Mercy was a big enabler of letting Jonak run the team basically. But I think the way they played around him and they made it almost, it was like methodical the way they peeled for him. It's like they knew every single scenario that was coming, and it's really hard to punish New York as well. A lot of their players are extremely smart. They know how to play the game. So all that together just makes New York, I think, really scary when it comes to just overall team play. And obviously their players are all strong individually. I don't think they have a single weak spot on their roster. So,
okay. Right, Monty, to wrap up the London part, obviously they did have two players leave. They had Rascal and Fisher were the two players who left. Rascal went to Fuel, I believe, and then Fisher obviously went to Gladiators, as previously referenced.
Yep.
So technically they have two more slots open on their team. Is their team, as it is right now, just fine? Can they still become champions again? Do you think they have to eye up some sort of a potential change in the future?
I think if you're London, what I would do is I would use, because again, just a reminder, the signing period is open for the next month or so. So there's an entire stage 2 that you can sign additional players before that window locks. If I'm London, I definitely sign an additional 2 players. I probably don't sign really great players right now. I probably sign young players in those positions. I would sign a young DPS player and I would sign a young tank player. Just so you can have in-house scrims first and foremost, and so you can develop them where they don't anticipate being a starter right away. Because I think that's probably the biggest reason why Rascal and Fisher left, is because they're starter level players. Yes. That Rascal didn't want to be a situational DPS player, and realistically, he was never going to get the most playtime with Prophet and Birdring on that roster. So if he wanted more playtime and not to be like a weird, Sombra May player when they needed him, then he should go to a different team, and he did. And Fisher is a top 3 tank in the world, so it was incredibly stupid to have him basically permanently riding the bench behind Gesture, where we saw him play a map or 2 here in stage 1. It was just a damn shame that he deserved better for sure. And I think that they realized that rather than keep these players in really shitty situations where they were going to be unhappy and sow discord within the team, then just get them out and get them into starting positions. And also, you'll notice that London, I think, probably intentionally did not deal these players to top teams. They basically gave good players to teams that had pretty bad records, who are not really going to be a threat to them.
They understand the spirit of charity. What you do is you give to the people who really need it. You don't just give to other people who already have a lot and can potentially beat you. I said that the second part in brackets there, but yeah, exactly. Great job.
Because I think that even though I personally wanted Fisher to go to Seoul, that probably was not going to be something that London was going to agree to.
We never got any calls from them. We'd already done deals with these other teams, and it just wasn't available. Sorry. Meanwhile, the Seoul guys, have they changed their number? What's going wrong here? We can't get in contact with them. Okay. Thing is, though, if you look at the Spitfire roster, though, it's kind of tying to what you just referenced. First of all, they have amazing DPS players. Obviously, Gesture. I mean, the fact that he could keep that other player out of the lineup says it all. And then they have basically all the support players in the world. So conceivably, considering it's a 10-man roster, there's not really any logical reason you need anyone, right?
Well, there's not, except for, again, developing talent internally and also so that you can 12-man scrim.
You can also then sell again to the lower teams. And basically, they're going to become, like, every season they're going to win, right? And then they're going to be like that guy with, like, the raincoat. Like, what do you need, son? What do you need? Listen, your team's doing bad. Need a little shot in the arm, do you? I've got just what you need. I've got got a Sombra main over here. Got a nice little DPS I've been bringing up. Don't tell anyone about it. Definitely don't tell those soul bastards, but yeah.
I think, honestly, it is objectively stupid for any team not to have 12 players by the end of stage 2. And the reason why I say that is there are several reasons. One of which is, again, internal scrims are very helpful. I think London said it helped them a lot. I think that's one of the reasons why Philadelphia is looking a lot better, is because one of the reasons they were so excited about getting their last remaining players here, EQO and Snillo, was they told me, they said, Will, we really just want to do internal scrims so that we can hide strategies. You can mimic other teams in practice. You have your B team pretend to be Soul and run their compositions, which no team is going to do because they're going to be, or opposing team, because they're going to be running their own comps, right, on a certain map. So there's a lot of advantages that you have with that. So first off, definitely provides you better practice to have the option at least to internally scrim. Yeah. Second off, the Overwatch League is doing very well. They've already been talking in the Activision earnings call about expanding the league for the next year. There's going to be a lot of interest in that. Certainly, we will be adding additional teams based on the performance of the league, which has been better than anybody expected and has generated a lot of hype. So when you're a team owner right now, remember that your contenders players are not protected. So what that means is that any contenders player on a contenders roster, this is the reason why Flower is not playing for New York's contenders team. Yeah. Is because any contenders player can be offered a contract by any Overwatch League team. So even if they're New York's contenders players, Flower could have still gotten an offer from another team, which is why he's just tied up in a contract directly to New York Excel itself for season 2. He's just free money right now, basically, as far as I understand it. So as a result, because you can't create a stable of rosters to sell to other teams on your contenders rosters, well, you can sell them, but it's not the same. Anyway, it would be 25% of the salary and bonuses. It's not like I can charge a flat fee to sell you this player. If I'm an Overwatch League owner right now, I definitely start adding to the maximum of the number of players that I can have, because simply you should be aware that there are going to be other teams, expansion teams coming in for season 2. And in that situation, I would like to be able to sell to these teams. So it's just smart business. Or you hold those players and don't sell them to the expansion teams so that you have a better position in the league. You have a bigger depth. They don't get as many good players. There's lots of reasons you could do it that way, right? But I think for those two reasons, internal scrims and control over top players that you can either sell or retain and keep them away from other expansion teams, I would be definitely, if I was a team owner, moving up to 12 players. It's just totally worth it.
Okay. Right, let's move on then. Since we've already, obviously, in contrast to London, talked about their rival, New York Excelsior, let's talk about them then. Okay, so Super, you've hailed them the best team in the league. Were they a team that you had any concerns about with the meta change? That, like, as you referenced, obviously, that was a big part of what made Jonak so amazing, was one of the MVP candidates. What do you think has changed in their team?
I really do think that the Mercy change is by far the biggest hit that any team is going to take from the switch to the meta. I think is New York, because the way they played around it was just so phenomenal. Even though they didn't win stage 1, London won obviously, but I think they're going to have to change. They're going to have to not rely on Jonak as much anymore, because he doesn't have the damage boosters in a Mercy pocket. He doesn't have that level of that security blanket over him anymore. Lucio, like I said earlier, speed boost is very good for disengaging, but sometimes the disengage won't matter because he'll be dead. So I think they're going to have to, let Jonak take a little bit more of a backseat and start having other players put in a little more work. Not saying that not everyone was slacking by any means, but If Jonak isn't going to be able to do as much, someone else is going to have to be able to pick that up a little bit.
Okay. Monty, what about where do you, if presumably Jonak's not going to be the same monster he was last stage, right?
No, he's not. And it's like he's saying, simply because he can't stay alive and he's not going to have the same damage boost to deal as much damage as he did and be a major source of the pain that's being issued by New York. So Arc is certainly a good Lucio player. We've seen that previously when he was playing in Korea. That's not really a question. The question is, how much can New York adapt their team style to synergize with this meta? Pine was playing a lot more, it looked like, which was a bit of a surprise because we have seen less Widowmaker and McCree overall, which meant that this last week sometimes we saw Pine playing Genji, which was weird and not great, I don't think. I do think New York is probably dipping in power, and this means that there's an opportunity for other teams to rise. I wasn't super impressed with what we saw out of London this week, as we talked about earlier, but Seoul looks like a lot better. So there's that factor too, is that Seoul might come in and be very dominant in this stage. And then there's also the Outlaws and Philly, who both also had very strong starts to this stage. And Outlaws look relatively unfazed. They're starting to add more players into their playing lineups. Clockwork was in both of the assault maps and did pretty well. We've seen a lot more Boink now. It's good. I think definitely the matchup of next week that's probably the most exciting is going to be New York versus Houston. There are a lot of good matches actually coming this next week, but New York versus Houston, I think, is going to tell us a lot about how these two teams, I think, we thought might perform worse in this stage, and so this will be a good test as long as Arc is back.
I think there's a potential for Seoul to grab the number 1 spot in the league, because even though they're like down a few match wins, this is their meta. You know, Genji, Tracer, Lucio, Diva, or Winston, Zenyatta. It's what they won 2 seasons of Apex with.
Yep.
Or the majority of the time they ran that. So I wouldn't say it's a surprise to me if they manage to come through and end up taking that first spot, because all their players are comfortable on those heroes. So to me, it just seems likely.
Okay, so obviously Seoul had made an addition as well, Gambler, but I saw it said that he can't play until stage 3, so he will not be included now.
He probably needs a visa, would be my guess. Some of those things just takes like about a month in order to complete.
It's not like the old days, you know. A long time ago, like, many presidents ago, back with this guy Obama, actually, people used to play in the NALCS without visas, Except Monty's team. As soon as Monty's team tried it, that was not going to be fucking allowed, quite frankly. And they locked it down, changed the whole law. I think they actually rewrote the Constitution as well at the same time.
Yeah, there was actually there was this company called Riot Games that just allowed people to play illegally in the States, even though they knew they didn't have visas. Weird how that works. And then suddenly, it was one of those times where suddenly one day you grow a conscience, it wasn't there before, didn't seem to matter, but then all of a sudden it really matters for some reason.
Yeah, don't worry, the first thing I will do.
Probably because those lawyers told them to. It's not actually, growing a conscience. It's just lawyers warning you.
It's okay, Monty. I'll make a movie, Time Cop 7, and then they'll be like, where are we going now, Jean-Claude? Like, we're going back to the year 2014. But what's this got to do with being a cop, though? We need to finally set right all the wrongs that were done back then. You do know about the law, right? No, I'm just a cop, mate. Well, whatever. Come back anyway. I'll tell you how it goes. Right. Let's transition to the other Korean team then, Seoul Dynasty. So Seoul Dynasty was a bit underwhelming when it got to the end of last stage, right, Monty?
Yes, clearly they were struggling massively with the Mercy meta. Their second DPS was not showing up. Miro was not playing particularly well. Miro looks a lot better, at least at the start in the first couple of matches here. And obviously with Toby back on Lucio, they seem a million times more comfortable. There have been interviews with Toby saying that he's even more comfortable shot calling on the Lucio. So I think it's tightened up their comms a lot of it, which may be explaining some of Miro's performance as well. So I think this is a great meta for Seoul. Bunny and Munchkin have both looked much better, so it seems like they took the break seriously and maybe in a better position now to make a better run at the stage 2 playoffs.
Okay, and with what Super said there, like he feels like this is it's their meta.
Yeah,
you're not going all in as that, like that they can potentially win the whole thing.
They might win stage 2. I think that's not outside of the realm of possibility. Okay. They've looked really strong so far. And all of the pieces, again, it's very early, so I don't want to read too much into 1 week of performance, but the Miro was underperforming. Looks better now. They didn't have the right meta for their support heroes. Looks better now. They will be playing more Ana, which obviously Jae Hong is the best at, so that's going to be encouraging. And Bunny and Munchkin needed to step up. That's looking better as well. So I think there's a lot to be encouraged about when it comes to Seoul. They were incredibly dominant over the Valiant. And one thing Seoul always did very well was that they had very decisive target selection and engagements. And when we saw the Valiant, it was kind of sad actually watching the Valiant play, because without the do-over of Mercy, their positional mistakes were punished. So every time Valiant would try and approach a point, the Dynasty would just rush in, pick off one of their members and win the fight, or stall it out, just force them into a room and basically wait for them to try and escape with only 5 people and then kill them all. So Seoul is looking really good at punishing positional errors, which didn't matter as much in the Mercy meta, because if you had a positional mistake, you could just res them with Mercy and then just continue on your way to the point. So it's changed a lot. And also, I think Mercy was really lowering the skill ceiling of the game, not only for individual support players, but for teams overall, because basically any team could just wait for their Valkyrie to be up and the enemy Valkyrie not to be up and have just a stupid advantage in a team fight. I mean, getting 2 players resurrected back after they've already died is incredibly difficult to overcome, even if you are a vastly better team.
Okay. And I saw there was that situation where, like, what was the reason why Bunny couldn't play in the game against Shock?
He was sick.
He's just sick, right? Okay. Because I saw actually in that game that Munchkin actually did something.
Yeah, he looked really good.
Wasn't bad, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any speculation as to why he had so many problems in stage 1?
I don't know. I think both their tracers were really underwhelming in stage 1. So.
Yeah. And like I said, or like Monty mentioned, Miro kind of like a shell of his former self in stage 1, but he looks a lot better now. So things are.
We'll see if it holds. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Things are looking okay right now. Looking a lot better.
That's the depressing thing, is that when the Overwatch League started, and some people who didn't follow Overwatch asked me like what teams to watch, when I told people to watch the Seoul team, sad thing is I told them like the 2 players to watch is Miro and Ryo Jeong, basically. Like, those guys are fucking amazing. Yeah. They're gonna be so good. And then obviously everyone was like, this Miro guy's fucking garbage. What are you talking about? And it's like, don't blame me. I didn't do it. I can only tell you the hype.
I also think that with Gambler's Edition, this is just insulation. So I think what Seoul did was they looked at how garbage they were in the Mercy meta, and they said, if Mercy ever comes back, or if we need Mercy in particular situations, let's just get the best Korean Mercy player. Why not? Well, besides Arc, I guess, because he's not available. But Gambler, I don't think we're going to have a situation where Mercy is as dominant ever again.
Probably not.
But even in maps where you would want to play Mercy and then switch to Lucio later on, even though Gambler he's a good Lucio player, he's still literally anybody on Lucio is a downgrade from Toby. But if you want to play both Mercy and Lucio on a map, having Gambler there to switch between the 2 is stronger than having Toby switch between the 2. So if you want the exclusive Lucio play, then Toby is definitely your best option. If you are in a situation where on attack you want to play Lucio, but on defense you want to play Mercy, then you put Gambler in for that map. So I think this is a really good pickup for them.
Okay.
And it does, you could tell that they thought very seriously about why they underperformed in stage 1 and are making adjustments to ensure that that doesn't happen again.
So they've got, I mean, obviously Gambler can't play technically right now anyway, but they've just got him locked away on the off chance that they need a Mercy. And then presumably he's just like, you know, locked away in some cell somewhere. Like I'm imagining, you remember in the Street Fighter movie, right? Obviously you don't super, probably came out before you're alive now, but in the Street Fighter movie, right? Monty, there was that, the way they showed the creation of the character Blanca was they took this normal soldier and they just strapped him with like a device on his eyes, showing him like, you know, like Clockwork Orange style. He was just watching like, you know, extreme violence all the time while being pumped full of steroids. points, and then that turned him into like a savage monster. Presumably, instead they're having the opposite effect. Gambler is off somewhere in sort of like a padded safe space. He's just watching scenes in movies, like he's watching like the scene in Pulp Fiction where that chick gets brought back to life. I'm trying not to give too many spoilers here for Super. And the chick comes back to life. Everyone remembers that scene, the shot scene. He's watching that scene at the end of Matrix 1. Again, spoiler, where reading
the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, now you fucking spoiled it. I was only on the Book of Job. Like, what? She telling me it's a resurrection now. Fucking, that's just unacceptable. Like, I wanted to enjoy that for myself. Yeah.
Bible spoilers.
Yeah. There was actually a straight banter one like that, Monty. You remember when when people spoiled that character in Harry Potter died, and they said like, page whatever, this character dies, right? Someone actually had a straight fire piece of banter where they put the same thing. They had a copy of the Bible and they were like, page 700, Jesus dies, which was actually pretty good. I can't lie. Like, that is pretty fucking good. I can't lie. But anyway, so okay. Let's move on then. So obviously the number one, are you ready, Monty? The number one Western team looks like it still is the Houston Outlaws, right?
Yeah. I predicted their downfall too. I've been really good at predicting their downfall and it not happening.
There's still time. Okay, so let's do this then. First of all, why did you predict their downfall? What was the reasoning?
So the first time I predicted the downfall of the Houston
Outlaws. The first time? How many times has this happened?
Twice.
Okay, right.
Was because they spent a lot of stage one when they were on that huge winning streak where they weren't even dropping maps, where they won like 4 best of 4s in a row, 4-0. They were basically just dumpstering bottom teams in the league.
There we go. That's the real reason. The schedule helped like a motherfucker for that streak. Come on.
It did. It did, absolutely. But then they came in and they made things super close where, they beat London and they made it to the stage playoffs. So I think you do have to credit them for also showing up against some of the top teams, right? So that was certainly obviously an encouraging situation, which I thought might change my mind about them a little bit. Houston, they outside of that first week of competition now, so they lost to New York in the first week and they lost to Philadelphia. But after that first week, they've only actually lost one series, again, outside of the stage playoffs, which don't actually count towards the record. So, and that was to Seoul, and they lacked Linkser. Okay, so let me put that back all together so people understand, because that was kind of confusing. So in the first week of competition, Houston lost 2 matches, but they were switching up their roster. Ever since that has happened, they have only lost to Seoul for matches that mattered, i.e. not for money, because the stage playoffs, because of the confusing format, don't actually affect the overall standings towards the season playoffs that come after stage 4. They've only lost to Seoul, and they lost narrowly, and it was without Linkser. That was the week where Linkser was sick. So basically, ever since Houston figured their shit out after week 1, they've only lost to Seoul. So that has been great to see. And they haven't played New York since that week 1, which is why this next week's match is going to be so interesting, because it's the only sort of top team besides themselves that they haven't played in their current form. Now, the second time that I predicted their downfall, it was because I thought that this patch would really hurt them, because of Banny had been doing very well on the Mercy. I think they were one of the better Mercy teams. Obviously, the Junkrat nerfs were not going to affect anybody that much. And it's still going to be a very strong hero. But I thought their defensive style was going to be punished more without the Mercy, because when you trade kills with dive now, it's more effective, because the Mercy can't just, if you're not playing Mercy, you can't just res somebody. So if, for example, you come in, the attacking team's diving, and they trade a Genji for the Widowmaker isn't just instantly resed anymore. And even if you trade 1-for-1, the attacker will have an advantage based on respawns. So there was better advantages for equal trading of kills without Mercy in the meta for the attacking team, if that makes sense. Okay. So I thought that they would suffer a bit due to their anti-dive, very defensive style, emphasis on holding very early, either full holding or holding on the earlier points of maps, because defense was always their strength, not necessarily their attacking rounds. Now, the other part of this was that they were absolute shit on control. they were terrible at playing control overall. And in a system where if you lose one control map and you lose one more map, one of the three, your tiebreaker is on control, you can't really afford to be bad at control. So they, however, came out of the gate and looked much better on control at this stage. So not only have they fixed their big map type flaw, it would appear, they have also adapted a lot of their play, used Boink more, used some of their other players to improve at some of the at some of these compositions that they're running. So I think they're looking quite good right now.
Okay. Although I do remember in a match, I think it was against London on Volskaya, they did almost get full held on first point, but I think they made it work on an overtime push, if I remember correctly. So I mean, London did end up winning the map, and both teams ended up full capping and going into a second round. But I think that's important to remember that they did almost get full held, but they didn't. They made it work in the end. So.
Okay, and I saw that in one of their games. Was it like Linkser was even playing Widowmaker now? So have they switched up how they're running the team?
Well, Linkser has been playing Widowmaker a lot, actually, overall. So he played a ton of Widowmaker in stage 1. Okay. And so that has maintained continuity. And part of Widowmaker is still viable, especially on certain maps like Gibraltar. But we should see less of her because there's people will say it's because of Mercy, but it's also because the map pool in stage 1 was incredibly Widowmaker favored. Right. Okay. Just like it's not like the patch changed Sombra, although the new patch might, which you might get into a little bit later. The patch didn't change Sombra. The reason why we're seeing so much more Sombra is because Volskaya and Route 66 are incredibly good Sombra maps. So it did not really the patch and more of just the maps that are available for teams.
Right. Okay. What about it was just announced, like I think yesterday, that they added fact fiction to the lineup officially. Like, what will that change?
I mean, Muma is one of the best tanks in the world right now, so he plays a great Reinhardt, plays an excellent Winston. I don't really know what fact fiction is going to do. Just be a sub, I guess. I can't imagine to see him anytime soon.
Well, the only thing I could potentially think of is, I mean, other than Fact is good. I think he's a pretty good player. But also, back on FaZe when he was still on that, Spree and Fact were the tank duo on that team, and Spree is obviously also on Outlaws. So I think there's a potential maybe at some point you'll see them in together. But that seems like it's that's the reason.
Okay. So obviously, I think it was the game against, was it? I think it was the Boston Uprising game. Right? It was the one where Muma went ham. What do you think of him in his current position, Super?
I mean, how do I think he's performing? Yeah. I think he's doing pretty well right now. Obviously, they're one of the best teams in the league. They have Muma plays an aggressive Winston, so the team has an aggressive play style. I think Coolmat is obviously a great diva as well. He really helps out Muma with his peeling. People say Coolmat's the best Western diva, and I think it's hard to argue that he is one of, if not the best. So overall, their team is doing pretty well, and I think their tanks are a big reason for that.
Is Muma the best tank?
No.
Why not?
Well, this is interesting. Rank a tank.
Yeah, come on.
Rank the tanks, huh? I mean, am I allowed to put myself at 1, or is that too like?
Yeah, go for it.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course you can.
So we're doing top 5 tanks right now in the Overwatch League. Okay, well, we'll put myself at 1. We'll do that.
Very good.
We'll go Fisher. Oh, no, we'll go Gesture.
Okay.
Then Fisher. And Miro has been a little lackluster, so I don't know about him right now.
Spitfire agrees with the first part of the ranking, except for the part about you being number 1.
Yeah,
okay, yeah. We went Miro before.
We'll ignore that part. We'll ignore that.
Did we go Miro before Muma, yeah?
Well, I don't know, because I think I want to see a little bit more of Miro, because like obviously stage 1 he had a lot of struggles, but he has looked better, so I think he should be in the discussion. Gamsu I think also played really well for Boston too. He was
Okay.
a big part of their success.
Is Muma ever going to get on this list? How far down is he already?
Well, none of these are ranked.
He's talking it out. He's talking it out.
Oh, right. You're just doing names, right?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Okay, I see. Right. I was confused. Okay. I thought this was like the most elongated fucking diss on Muma ever. Like, is there anyone else plays tank? Who else out there? Fucking, I don't know. Like,
No. But
Reinforce. Is he still around?
Reinforce. I like Reinforce, but
Can you imagine? No, keep going. Yeah.
No. I think Muma's probably he might be 4 right now. Just the way he's playing is really strong. He's been consistent the whole season. I think it's hard to say that he's ever had a bad game, except for maybe in those first 2 weeks. Other than that, everyone on that team has played pretty well. You can't really complain about the way they played. So, probably right there is where I put Muma 4 in the league, and then you could put Gamsu at 5.
Okay. So, Monty, if we live in a world where, like, everyone already knows Lynx is a pretty fucking good player.
Wait, before we get to this, I want to rank the tanks myself.
On,
Hold on.
Right, rank the tanks.
Let's get into this.
Well, I haven't seen you play tank super since you were on LG.
So you're not on the
so
list,
unfortunately,
right?
I cannot
list,
rank
obviously.
you.
Yes,
That's fair. All right.
And you were playing shitty NA teams, so against shitty NA teams. So you have yet to prove yourself agast world-class competition.
We are talking about the Houston Outlaws, mate. Some of them turned out to be okay.
That's true.
Say, yes, keep going.
So my rank a tank would be Gesture, Fissure, Muma. Then I would probably take.
Oh, I forgot about Mano. Oh shit.
Gamsu and Mono in that order.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure how good Mono's Reinhardt is right now, which is why he's on the lower side. Whereas I feel very confident in the other people's ability to play most of the meta heroes. Although Mono is a very good Orisa. I feel confident in that ranking. I feel confident. Mono and Gamsu are very close.
Okay. Okay, then let me ask you this then. If you had to speculate, why do people then say that Muma is the best tank or the best Winston or whatever? Like, is there something about how his team plays that makes him seem more so? Because, for example, when you list off people like Fissure and Gesture, admittedly within their teams, they're not going to look like the best player, are they?
I think there's an argument for them both. Well, Fissure is now on Gladiators. I think you can make
He's
a very
definitely
strong...
the best player on that roster.
I was mainly meaning in the past, obviously. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you can make an argument for Gesture though. I mean, Birdring and Prophet are very, very good. Everyone on the team is very good, but I think right now in Overwatch, if you don't have a good tank, you're not gonna do well. It's like the way it works. So if your team is doing well, it's probably because your tank is doing well.
Okay, by that logic then, I have to ask you the obvious follow-up question.
Yeah,
which teams do not have good tanks?
You don't have to talk about Shock. We won't make you do that.
Is this like a diss? Is this like a little diss here?
No.
No, it's just ranking. It's the other end of ranking.
This
is literal tanking. So, yes.
I think it was kind of unlucky for Swoosh to be put on tank because I don't even think Swoosh is that bad, to be honest, but obviously he was a DPS player and he was forced to switch to Winston in tanks, which is I don't know exactly what happened with that. I don't know if he agreed to it or if that's just the way it worked. But
I think he just wanted to be in the Overwatch League.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose.
Weird.
But yeah. Who else is there? Shanghai. They got a lot of new additions. I think Shanghai.
Yes, they changed some players.
When they get here, I think they're dealing with visas. So when they get here, I think they'll have some big improvements to their team, especially in the tanks.
Because here's the thing: when you were listing off tanks, you didn't tell me anyone from the LA Valiant. But I mean, at the times last season they were doing.
Well, I think Fate is really good too. I think Fate and Envy are a great duo. There's a lot of good tank duos, a lot of good players, obviously Overwatch League, but I think Fate is really strong. I don't think Fate is bad by any means, but I think when it comes to tanks in the Overwatch League, a lot of like when you get to the top, it's really close because they're all really good players, and I think you can make a case for some to be stronger than others. But when it comes down to it, I think it's a lot closer than people might think.
Okay. So another question I had, Monty, about the Houston Outlaws team was, obviously with this edition of Fact Fiction, they have stayed true to this philosophy, presumably, of like no Koreans, basically. They're just going with like obvious, I don't know if fucking Hector's family was involved in like the Korean War or something. I don't know what this is, why no Koreans allowed to join his team, but he stayed with the all-Western team. Admittedly, some Europeans obviously part of it.
I don't think Hector has anything to do with the actual roster signings of this team. I think that's all down to Flame, basically, the GM of the team. And
does he just not want Koreans?
Flames, he's got all his old TF2 boys, you know? I think he has a...
Oh, nepotism, my mistake. Right, okay.
I don't think it's nepotism. I think that can we argue with his results? I don't think we can. I think they're doing fantastically well. So... I think what his philosophy is that he understands these players very well because many of them he's been working with for years. And so he understood which of these players from other scenes would complement each other's abilities. He knew who was motivated to really practice and play their best. So I think there is some pride there probably in creating an all Western roster that has better communication and better synergy as a result. And I think it's really hard to argue with the fact that they've been performing way better than anybody would have expected. So it's been highly successful. And again, I don't think Fact Fiction is actually going to play on this roster anytime soon, not unless Muma takes a big dip in performance. Again,
no, but I mean, that would be
about having 12 players on your roster and having players that you can sell to other teams in the future.
But I mean, the implication there, Monty, by the very fact that they've signed someone who is probably not going to play tells you that they don't think they have any holes in their team. They don't need another DPS to sit back or a different healer. They just think that the team's good to go now.
I think that what they believe is that they want a backup for Muma in case anything happens. I mean, look how many times already we've seen in the Overwatch League players be sick or injured and can't actually perform on a given week. And if that happened to Houston, they literally don't have another choice for main tank right now. Probably Spree would have to play it or somebody like that. So I think that they're just trying to cover their bases, honestly. And I think that's a smart idea.
Okay, super. Here's the thing. When Monty said all that stuff, you can't argue with the results, all the rest of it. He did mention earlier that he's written off this team a number of times, or he's downplayed them, right? Because here's the thing: when you have the option to potentially sign some Korean players, I mean, hey, they could have been in the mix to get a Fisher or something like that. When you don't sign them, but you've had this playoff success, you've started out so strong. Logically, we should be asking the question: can Houston Outlaws win this stage of Overwatch League?
I think it's possible, yeah, because. Yeah, like I said, I think you have teams like New York who are going to take a little bit of a dip because the meta, I don't think, is in their favor as much as it was Stage 1. But then you have teams like Seoul who are also on the rise. This meta, they're probably I would probably go out and say that this. I think they might have the best chance of winning the Overwatch, this stage of Overwatch at least, Overwatch League. So it's possible, but I think it's going to be hard, obviously, because. London, I think, is still going to be really strong, even though they lost to Houston. But they also lost to Houston in Stage 1, and then they ended up beating them in the playoffs. So, they can do it. It'll be hard, but they can do it.
It's also worth noting, for those people who are confused by the very confusing format of Overwatch League, that for Stage 2, everything resets for the Stage 2 playoffs. Right. So even though for the Overwatch League season-ending playoffs, it is a continuous record, for the purpose of who makes it into the Stage 2 playoffs, everything has reset right now. So the fact that Seoul, Houston, and Dallas and Philly are already all 2-0 is very impactful. Because even though Dallas is at the towards the bottom of the regular standings, the fact that they're 2-0 in these standings mean that they are obviously in contention for a playoff slot already.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Right. Let's talk then about a team I just referenced earlier, another of the Western hopes, at least until the end of the stage, Monty, and that was the LA Valiant. And they were a team where, at one point in time, they looked like far and away the best of the Western teams, with the caveat that I also kind of I wasn't really buying the Houston Outlaws streak because it was like, there's a reason why like New York Excelsior hasn't done this streak. They actually had a normal schedule where eventually you play another Korean team. You know, like so anyway, with all that said, Valiant at one point in time looked amazing. Now, I think they did one change themselves, didn't they? Who did they add?
Sorry, say that again? Well,
they just
fired
changed
their
coach
right, or got rid of their coach.
Oh, Valiant, yeah.
Left.
Yes. Okay, so apparently they agreed with me. Something went wrong at the end. They fired the coach. And now what do you think?
I don't know about that. I'm actually really surprised that they dumped Cuddles, their coach, because they didn't make any roster additions, which is interesting. And they still have a player, Space, who will be coming of age at some point during, let's check his...
He has the same birthday as me, so stage 3.
Oh, you're right. He does have the same birthday as you. So stage 3. With how Envy is playing, I'm not sure that's going to be the big deal. But what was so strange about the Valiant is, you know, they looked really strong at the end of the season. They beat Seoul. They beat Seoul 3-0 at the end. It was a very convincing win. The fact that they beat Seoul basically allowed Houston a chance to get into the stage playoffs and threw everything into chaos in terms of who was making it at the end of stage 1. So they were looking strong. So it was baffling to me that they would get rid of their coach. So they got rid of Cuddles, who is a British coach, and they signed a coach named MBC, who is the former coach of a Korean team, an Apex team called Mighty AOD. And Mighty AOD used to contain Fate and Kariv. And
where's the score from?
All of a sudden, as soon as Valiant come back, Kariv is playing DPS again. Weird. Yeah.
It's interesting how these things work, isn't it? So anyway, we're going to be doing our post-stage 1 performance reviews, and we just wanted to touch base, see what's going on, fire the coach and get in my friend. Yep. Okay. Well, whatever you say. Even though I've built my team as mainly a Western team, I will let the Koreans run the squad, and I will be firing him immediately. Okay.
The Kariv mutiny and his attempt to get back to DPS has been successful, I guess.
Well, Monty, that's a point we need to talk about with this team, right? So he was playing DPS. Why is that? Why is he playing it instead of Grim Reality, a player who actually at times was getting plaudits for it, right?
Well, Grim was never a super good soldier player. He was like a Tracer McCree player, so I'm not sure about his abilities. The question, I think, more interestingly, is where was Silk Thread, who was a soldier player, and is the coach so look, we don't know. This could be a motivation tactic. For all we know,
admittedly, it was against dragons as well. Like it's not like they did it in a real game. You know?
Yes, it may have been a test. It may have been just seeing how good is Kariv, because he did flex into Widow at times, especially on Junkertown for Valiant. He's always been a great Widowmaker player. He did play DPS in Korea before he moved over to the West to Immortals and started playing
for the very team where the coach was on. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it all ties in again. Right?
I do think that the Fate Kariv mutiny must have been in effect.
Put me in, coach. Put me in. You know what I can do. Get these guys out of here. Put me in.
And maybe there's a scenario, again, I have no knowledge of this, but if they're trying to motivate Agilities and Silk Thread and Grim Reality to practice more or something like that, maybe you do move Kariv into that situation. Also, neither Kariv or Unko has extensive experience on Lucio, which means that one of them is going to be out and Verbo is going to be in, so you experiment more with that part of the roster. But they went from, in the last week, absolutely dumping on Seoul to getting absolutely dumped on by Seoul. It was a very interesting week 5 versus week 1. Again, part of that is the meta and Toby playing like an absolute god again. But part of that also is some of these, I think the coaching change threw things into chaos for them.
Yeah.
What did you think of last stage's Valiant Super?
I mean, they almost made playoffs. They granted they had the least chance of making it out of any of the Boston Outlaws, just because the way it ended up working out. We ended up taking Seoul to map 5, so they got knocked out because they needed to beat us 4-0 to have a chance to get in. So that didn't happen. Soon and Unko, obviously very great players. They were on Rogue, that Rogue dynasty in the West for a while. And like I mentioned earlier, I think Fate and Envy are really good players. So I think they have a really strong roster. it just seems weird to me that because they had the soul match first in that week, right?
Yes.
And they had agilities in full time. They lost 4-0. So I don't know if that was like a gut reaction, like from the coach to swap the agilities out and put Kriv in. He's like maybe getting a. I hope not, because he was a coach in Korea for a long time, coaching Apex. So I think he has the ability to keep a level head and know that not to make immediate gut reactions. But maybe that was the case. He put Kriv on DPS against Shanghai.
See, the interesting thing is, though, Super, actually, for people who followed games like League of Legends, that's actually a very famous thing that Korean coaches do, which is that if you lose the game is when they tend to bring in the sub or the person who can play your spot. Either because they think that it's going to go badly again, or I think sometimes either to motivate you to win your spot back or to give the other guy a chance to see, well, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, it's quite a famous approach, actually.
Interesting. Yeah, I never watched League of Legends, so that's actually...
You didn't miss anything, don't worry. Didn't miss anything, so.
Says the guy who makes how many League shows right now?
Mate, I've never ever claimed League of Legends is a good game. Have you ever noticed that? I said it was one of the most popular games. I said it's interesting to follow.
So we can settle this right now. Is League of Legends a good game?
No. Obviously not. Wait, I thought Dota 2 was better the whole time anyway.
Yeah.
I just have enough balls that no one can fuck with me over it, you know. So,
so is Overwatch a good game, Duncan?
I'd say like half and half. Like, here's the thing. I actually do think it was overplayed how bad it is to spectate. Because personally, I actually really enjoy watching the DPS players watch it. It does tap into some of the Counter-Strike component of what I like about that game, you know. I think that's pretty fun. I will say that... because I just don't watch enough, I can't claim to know as much about the strategy elements, so I can't really gauge that right now. I can't really judge it as much, you know. So I think it's an alright game. I definitely wouldn't say it's one of the best games.
The only League of Legends I've put myself towards is the Tyler 1 stream. Other than that, you know, that's...
You're doing so well until now. You were doing so well. Okay.
What can I say?
So is CSGO a good game?
It's a pretty good game. It's not actually as good as the old version of CS.
1.6.
Nah, but it's a pretty good game. Like, the good thing about CS is, first of all, it has no competitors in sort of its game type, so it's undisputed in that sense. Right. And then secondly, and this is a key element, actually, believe it or not, I think that a key element that also boosts CS and makes it better is, like, I think its tournament circuit is like 10 times better than all the other tournament circuits, so... For me, it's exactly what I want. You have tournaments every month or so. You have all the great teams meeting constantly in finals and semi-finals. So that enhances what you already have with a game, in my opinion. Whereas that's one area where a lot of the other games, obviously, are way more restricted, you know. Like, I don't really give a fuck about league play, for example. I realize this is a show that is a league, and we're talking about something that even has the word league in it, but... I keep it real. What can I tell you?
That's. I mean, I agree with you. I would certainly. Actually, we should have a conversation about this in just a second about different formats that could be used for Overwatch League, because I would like to see some changes made, and we could discuss what those changes might be. But here's the real question: is StarCraft Brood War the best esport?
Here's the thing, it is, if you do what I just did there, where I took in like extra factors aside from the game, it is. Because as a game, I could argue that like I wouldn't put Counter-Strike #1, by the way. My favorite game was obviously Quake, in fact, the original Quake. Now, there's a version in Quake that is a team version. It's a 4v4 version in Quake World. That is really amazing. Like, if you've ever followed it, the level that you can get to in both strategy and skill is unreal in that game. But the problem is, like, that game was only an esport for basically like 2 years. And then it continued on for literally a decade afterwards, but as like an underground game. So the downside of that is it's basically only people playing for fun. Now, there were still, you know, still people who played a lot, but, you know, for fun and in online, basically. So I can't really put that up against a game like Brood War, because the key thing with Brood War is, as a game, it's already like a contender for best game ever.
Yes,
and then absolutely. You add in that basically that game was almost perfect in terms of its professional scene. I mean, it was a nightmare in as much. I always describe it as like a beautiful travesty that they allowed that scene to exist, because basically you just ruined about 10,000 wrists, probably gave a lot of people like PTSD or some sort of mental trauma, you know. It's basically like the NFL of esports games. It's an amazing game, still great, but probably no one should ever be put through those conditions and circumstances. But I tell you what, if you could,
those conditions and circumstances created incredible storylines,
which is my point, Monty.
Absolutely mind-blowing tournaments.
So here's my point, Monty. No one should ever be subjected to Ray Lewis coming down the middle and taking your fucking head off. But it's amazing to watch. And likewise, it was amazing to watch people who didn't break and just went to the top and were the best champions ever. So yeah, I would say Brood War gets #1 overall. All factors combined, you know.
I agree with you 100%.
And also, we can tie this into the next topic, Money. Another reason that made Brood War great was it combined all the circuits as well, because it had a league, so you can watch a league format, watch every week, but it also had the individual tournaments, which were akin to the bigger competitions.
And just remember that we did have that in Korea in League of Legends for 1 year, and then it got destroyed, which made me very sad.
So anyway, you wanted to talk about
2014,
formats?
The best year of League of Legends that will ever exist. Anyway, yes, I did want to talk about formats because we've referenced it several times on this show now, how confusing the current format is, because it's sort of, there's like a running total of the records, but then there's also the resets that happen every stage. But then the stage playoffs seem cool, but then you only earn money and they don't actually have any significance. And also, they're just so... Stage 1 and Stage 2 are just such horribly boring names and concepts that it's hard for me to get excited. Yeah. And so what I would like to see happen, and I have talked to Blizzard about this, is that I would like, instead of having stages, for us to have cups. So instead of a stage, you call it a cup. So you might have like the whatever. You can theme it with the game if you want. You can call it like the Omnic Cup. So you know Mario Kart?
Yes.
So you sort of have like the different cups, right? Like you have in Mario Karts, but there's actually an aesthetic theme around it. And you can even vary the formats between cups. So for example, if you have like the first cup of the year might have a subtly different format than the second cup, than the third cup. So teams, you could have consistent storylines for teams that perform well in certain formats as opposed to others. Obviously, you don't want to like totally fuck it up for the playoffs at the end. And the thing that I would really like to see is that the winners actually not only get money but have significance. So what I like about the stage system is the resets. What I don't like is that a match in Stage 1 is weighted the same as winning a match in Stage 4. And what I think one of the best things that League of Legends did was implement the circuit point system that weighted the spring split or the summer split better than the spring split, because the meta is closer. You don't want a team that was super hot in Stage 1 and Stage 2 to make the playoffs when they have a horrible Stage 4 and are entering the Overwatch League playoffs in a massive slump.
Well, let's go the other. Also, don't forget the other option, Monty. Like, obviously, like this at the moment doesn't look like it will happen. But let's imagine for some reason that Shanghai Dragons had changed everything, and at the very end they became actually the best team in the Overwatch League. Well, they would never be in the playoffs at the end of the split, would they? At the end of all 4 stages, it couldn't happen, basically.
Right, and the problem is that any team that's in the bottom of the standings right now. So we can take San Francisco Shock. So you guys are getting 2 new players who are turning 18, who we know are good, and so. But you're in such a hole that because it's a continuous record, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to make the playoffs unless your performance increases dramatically in this stage without these new players, right? So the issue is, because there aren't circuit points. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here, Thorin, because we're making a lot of assumptions that the people listening might not know about. So the way it works in League of Legends is, for example, in my proposed system, so every cup, the winner might get 100 points for the first cup, and you give the team's points, circuit points or championship playoff points, based on their rankings 1 through 12. But then the second cup, you reset everybody's records, and you play again. But in the second cup, the first team might get 120 points, and every team gets slightly more points based on their ranking. And then the third cup, you get slightly more points. Fourth cup, you get slightly more points. So even if you have like an absolutely terrible Cup 1 and Cup 2, then by Cup 3, if you start placing like top 2 or 3, you can still make a strong case for the playoffs, because you'll be getting more points because it's weighted heavier closer to the playoffs. Yes. If that makes sense. Do you understand that, Super?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is it like a set amount for like it's like just as an example, so like the stage that's later will be worth like 1.5 points compared to the one in like
correct.
That's how okay. Cool.
So basically, teams that are super good in the beginning of the season, they still get points, but if they fall off in the later part of the season, they may not make playoffs. Whereas a team, so for instance, what I don't really like about the current format is if we take a look at the overall results of the league. So we look at the Shanghai Dragons. They are currently 0-11 with a negative 32 map score. There is almost no chance that they dig themselves out of this hole without running the entire table, because not only are they 0-11, but they have such a terrible map differential that even if they were to get super good. So let's pretend that with all these new players that by the end of stage 4, they are looking like they're a top 6 team. Well, it doesn't matter because they're already in this giant gaping crevasse. And so it's unfortunate because it also, you obviously are in a much better situation than the Shanghai Dragons, but even if you had a bad stage 1 and stage 2, if under my system, if you had a top 3 finish or top 4 finish in stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4, there's a chance you could still make it to the playoffs. And that way it's rewarding the teams that are coming in strong while not penalizing the teams over much who are good early on.
Right.
And the other thing that this does is it creates an actual hype for the playoffs at the end of every stage, because it's about more than just money. It's about money and playoff points, which are going to be super important for you to actually win the entire league. So the idea is that the broad idea is that you have like month-long tournaments, which are more hype than a long-form league. And I think that creates just a better dynamic overall and will give us better playoff teams in the end. So I'm not super upset about the format the way it is right now, but I think it could be done a lot better.
Right.
Well, there's also the aspect which you touched on, but obviously because you went down the side track of the circuit points you didn't explain, which is that you could also have each of the cups have a different format. So, for example, at the moment, they use the traditional Korean method, which is that you have a league that goes into what they call a gauntlet. So 3 plays 2, winner of that plays 1. So basically, if you finish first place in the league, like New York Excelsior just did, you're automatically in the final. Now, okay, that has its own merit to it, and I can certainly see why Koreans like it, because, by the way, it adds extra significance to trying to win all the games in the regular season, so you want to guarantee your place in the finals. Right. But there's definitely other formats that I would like to see explored. Like, for example, when you referred before to OGN back in League of Legends, a classic single elimination bracket where you have, say, 8 teams. I mean, it might not work for this league. You might need to have, like, 6 teams or something like that. That's always a pretty good one as well, because then if you win the playoffs, you have to play minimum, say, 3 rounds, 2 rounds. You have to win more matches, you know?
Well, you can even do other things. So you have to remember that, at least for the purposes of Overwatch League, there are certain minimums based on the team signing up of games that they have to play. So they have to get a certain amount of visibility, right? So if you just set up a big bracket and eliminated half the teams
I meant to do the playoffs. You do a league as in now when you take the playoffs from the seedings.
Yeah, but right now it's just sort of like it's not even a full round robin, because we have each team plays 10
that
matches.
In itself is very weird to me when it comes to deciding the stage part, because sooner or later someone's going to end up with a schedule that was a bit easier, get a few matches where they get the right maps, and that might actually just boost them into the playoffs.
And you have to remember too that at the end of, not every team, even over the course of all 4 stages, plays each other an equal amount of times. So
that just hurts my brain to even think about.
Some teams in the entire league, not only stage by stage, but in the entire system, are going to have favorable schedules. So, but to get back to it, like, you can play a round robin or almost a round robin, but you could also do other things. Like, for example, for one of the cups, you could say we are going to have a group draw based on the seeding of the last stage playoffs, where you have like one of those cool Korean style like group selection shows where everybody talks trash and everything like that, and you draw yourselves into different groups, and maybe you play like a double round robin in your group, and then you play against the other teams like one time.
Yes. So you could do like the conference, basically. That's all. An approach.
Yeah, you could do anyway. The point is, you could do many, many different things where you would subtly change the format cup to cup. And you would, and I also think that it would be cool just to set it up that way, so that there's actually like a physical trophy that you win that's consistent. So if we call the first cup the Omnic Cup every year, and teams are like, yay, we won this, there's like an actual trophy that exists, and we can say, oh yeah, this team won the Omnic Cup last year, and this one won it this year, came out to a strong start, or this team is good in this format. You could do map drafts for one cup. You could do set maps for another cup. There's tons of stuff you could do. I don't have all the answers, but these are just some ideas that you could throw out there to make it different and exciting. And I think that would be a good compromise, because what people have to understand is, while we you talk about liking this competitive circuit, which is great, but what the competitive circuit doesn't do is oftentimes it won't give you enough stability to have big sponsors, to have big owners come in, because they want the constant visibility on their team. So leagues are very good for sponsorship and ownership, even if they're less exciting for...
It's also very good for revenue. Like, I'll say that. In CSGO, the revenue for teams is god-awful.
Yes. And so in this scenario, it's better business to run a league-style format, but that doesn't mean it has to be a traditional league where you just sort of all play each other forever. There are ways you can manipulate this system to make it more attractive to fans and generate more excitement, while still ticking all those boxes for the sponsors and for the revenue. And that's what I would really like to see happen. So I think I'm going to be working very hard to try and push some of these format ideas in the future within Blizzard, because that's part of what I do, working with Overwatch League. But it is something that I think about constantly, and how it could be a better system, because it's not like offensively bad right now. It's just sort of bland. It's very vanilla. You know what I mean?
I do get tilted by that part that you said, where like even over the whole Overwatch League entire season, you don't necessarily play each team the same amount of times.
That is
because like that's one of those things in the NFL that tilted me, where it's like, well, these records mean nothing. Depends what fucking division you're in, doesn't it? Like, if you're in some bum-ass division, you get to have a better record than me. And here's the thing. I get it in the NFL. You can only... First of all, it comes from when you had to travel to that area. And then secondly, it's obviously based on, like, you can't play too many NFL games because, as we alluded to before, people's brains stop working. Meanwhile, in Overwatch, nothing happens if you play 10 games in a day. We already saw that. You just maybe get mad tilted. Admittedly, some people might end up with some sort of trauma from that, but that's just sort of funny in its own way.
I don't think that teams should be playing 10 games in a day. And I do think that well, fair enough. I do think that the regionalization will make it more like the NFL, where we are going to have to consider strength of schedule just based on everything, because that's any traveling, any localized team, eventually you're going to have to deal with strength of schedule, right? That's just, unless you're in a very small league like English Premier League. Do they play each other an equal amount of times? I don't even know. Yes,
but you have to understand, you can travel all of England about 5 hours.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. So it's a different scenario. So I'm sure the strength of schedule thing and the strength of region and the strength of conference will come in the future, because right now conferences are basically meaningless. I think they just made the conferences because that's for future localization stuff. But I believe that, like, we should be doing more with the formats as it is right now, and then we can deal with some of these other strength of schedule issues at a later date. And I agree, it is weird that the scheduling resulted in something. I think it's just because they wanted to have the teams only play twice a week and have the 4 broadcast days, and so that means we have 5 weeks of 4 broadcast days a week. So every team plays 10 games a stage. And so because we have 4 stages, that means every team plays 40 games. We have 12 teams. Therefore, not all teams are going to hit each other an equal amount of time. So I think that was putting the structure of the 5-week stages, 4 broadcast days, ahead of making sure every team hit each other an equal amount of times.
Okay, right. About 10 minutes ago, Super's eyes glazed over. He just nodded a lot. He heard you say a lot of terms that sound. I mean, they sounded
sure
cool, but
Super's so new to esports. He's not.
He hasn't even played one game in the Overwatch League. He's not worried about different formats.
To other leagues.
Back in OGN, I really liked the. I think you brought it up earlier, how they did the format of, like, they had the day designated where people would pick their they'd pick their match. I think that was like, it's like really cool, right? That was like like the most fun part about OGN, honestly, was watching the teams, trash talk each other and get
like
the pick
that young
play.
Super. You would love a game that we referred to called StarCraft Brood War, which is where that's from, where at the start of some of these tournaments, when they went into group play, they would basically just shit talk each other and pick all the groups. So it's a really fun system. It's a really fun system.
Yes. I mean that sounds like, because like I remember Rogue picked Envy season 1 because they thought they were weak, and then they ended up beating them, and they won the whole thing. So.
Actually, as a side point, Munchie, I'll tell you one other thing, because we just had this in Counter-Strike, and actually it's also a cool format idea I had never heard of before. So what they did is, I think they've changed it now, because they've just changed the format, we don't use groups anymore, but for the last season of ESL Pro League, when it got to the LAN finals, they did sort of the opposite of what you were describing, where, like technically in the Korean one, you did not only pick your own group or others, so you could make someone else's group hard, but what they did is, they had something like that, where basically, based on seeding, they went down the seeds and you each picked who was in the other group. So what happens is it puts the impetus on you to pick as hard a group as you can for the other guy, right? So it made the two groups for the LAN finals and Counter really good. They were really even because both sets of seeds, as they went down, 1 and 1, then 2 and 2 in NA and EU. Obviously, you're both trying to make the other person's group as hard as possible, which actually ends up being like a really advanced seeding system if you think about it, because it's very unlikely you're going to put an easy team in the other guy's group and let him get a free win. So that was quite a clever idea, I thought, by ESL. It's not a bad one.
Unless you thought you had a really good matchup for if you had some mind game where you give them an easy team, so they give you a harder team in a good matchup.
I don't think they were thinking that far ahead, Monty. That's a level of abstraction away.
Like 40 chess,
a lot of these players weren't thinking on that level. Man. I agree with you. It has flaws in it, but don't tell them that. They won't figure it out.
I don't think that's a flaw. I think it's an interesting strategic move. I don't think it's a flaw in the system.
Also, everyone in your group might just beat the fuck out of you for putting a good team in your own group. Like, why are you doing that? We're supposed to be... Anyway, to get it back on track. So we were talking about the LA Valiant, because I remember what was going on a while ago. Gradually, the anesthetic drains out of my system. More consciousness, lucidity comes to me. Right, okay, here's the question, though. Does Valiant get back to top team status? They've already started off with a loss, obviously. Who gives a fuck about beating the Dragons at this point in time with the lineup they've got? So do they get back that super? Does Valiant become like a top 4 team in the Overwatch League?
I think right now top 4 is New York, London, Houston, and Seoul. Not in any order, but that's I think top 4 right now.
Just coincidentally, almost
at
exactly
least in
the order
this
you would have given
stage.
them in. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I like the caveat, but yeah, I believe you. Okay.
But I think last stage you could put Valiant in top 4. Even though Boston and Houston technically were above them, I think I would have put Valiant somewhere in there in that top 4. But this stage, they didn't look at all like they did in stage 1 against Seoul, because that was just not a good showing from them. And they're having a bunch of swaps now. Kariv's going to DPS. He hasn't played that in a long time. Verbo's actually coming in now, starting to play more. So I think there's going to be changes that are going to be hard for the Valiant to adjust, and maybe they'll pick it up. But right now, I don't see them having the same performance that they did in stage 1.
Well, it took Valiant a while to sort of figure out who was going to play Mercy by the end, but I think once that they committed Kariv to the Mercy, they started looking much better.
Right.
So I suppose my question is Verbo a good enough player compared to the other Lucios in the league to make up for it? Because he was struggling against Seoul really hard. And that could be just because he hasn't been playing the lineup and they need to work on their teamwork and communication, but it wasn't the world's best Lucio performance. Let's put it that way.
Well, I played with Verbo a long time ago, probably, well, I guess it was over a year ago at this point, on a team back when we were still Bird Noises, before we got signed by a team to LG and Hammers and all those teams before. But he was our Lucio, and then Immortals poached him from us. And so I know how he works, and I played against him obviously many times. I think he's a good player. Like the leadership that he brings and the communications that he brings to the team is very valuable. I've seen obviously Immortals before they picked him up were like kind of a joke, not to be mean, but they didn't do too much. They got to LAN, but obviously they went to the E-League, but they got knocked out. I think they lost all their group stages. But they picked up Verbo. They won the first monthly melee with him. They started going into a lot of tournaments, getting really good showings. So I think Verbo, once he gels with the team, I think he will have or re-gels with the team, I suppose, because it's still Immortals brand now with Valiant. I think he'll have a good showing.
Yep, playing Verbo.
So I talked about about how he, like, once he regels with the team, I think he'll be a strong addition.
Oh, you're talking about his communication. I guess my question is that communication necessarily as valuable when half your roster is Korean?
And your coach.
And your coach.
That's true.
It may limit his ability to impact the team. I totally got derailed there. But we can.
Well, what other flaws do Valiant have? Because remember, the premise was whether they're going to be a top team, right?
I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to use agilities and silk thread as much as they would like. I think there's a lot of questions as to whether they have somebody to pair with soon who's really going to be up to his level necessarily.
Is this a team that gets hurt by Mercy going? Not just because obviously Kareev played it, but does the new meta damage Valiant's chances?
I mean, you'd think that they would be better with Dive, but again, without the Lucio play necessarily there yet, they may suffer from that. So they may have lost as much as they gained in a way.
Right.
Okay.
And I do think that they really do need to work on their positioning. They were just mega punished by Soul. Basically, every time they tried to approach Soul on it, when Valiant was attacking and Soul was on defense, they were intercepted. Somebody was picked off. They were really having difficulties.
Yeah, the game against Soul was definitely probably the weakest showing, I would say.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Okay.
And that could be a coaching change. It seemed like a lot of what they had done was thrown into chaos as a result of the coaching change potentially. So they may have been less prepared. We'll see how they do next week after they have a little bit more time.
They play Gladiators.
San Francisco Shock.
Wait, am I looking at the... Oh, wait a minute.
Two.
Oh, they did play us.
Dallas Fuel.
I was looking at the wrong week. My bad. Yeah, so...
So one easy win, and then they've got to play a real team. You know,
Dallas Fuel's gonna get smacked around a little bit.
Okay, what about this then? Let's switch to talking about Philadelphia Fusion, because they're obviously a team who seemed to get stronger as Stage 1 went on. They played here. They've 8-0'd the first week. They played Boston. They played Florida Mayhem. What do you think of Philadelphia Fusion, Super? Because this is an interesting team.
So they made a change to their starting lineup. They're now playing Echo instead of Shadowburn on the Genji, which
pretty shocking, right?
I think it's interesting because Shadowburn, he's a really good Genji. But one thing about if you ask any pro player who has regularly played against Shadowburn, they'll tell you that he doesn't blade unless there's a trance that is used up by the other team. So he will literally hold that blade for 8 minutes if the enemy player doesn't pop trance.
Yes.
And I don't know if that might be a part of it, that they don't like his reluctance to blade to ult, maybe force out other ults even. But obviously you can't argue they're 8-0 right now. They look pretty good, so it's working for them.
We also don't really know what else happened over the break
obviously.
for Philadelphia. So EQO, as I alluded to before, EQO and Snillo coming in allowed them to scrim internally. So we don't know what kind of information they got from those scrims. I can tell you that basically in every statistical category, even though it was just 1 week of competition, EQO's averages were higher than Shadowburn's. So statistically, he performed better. Again, limited sample size. And also the fact that Philadelphia obviously increased their teamwork and coordination pretty substantially during the break as well. Fraggy is not dying anywhere close to as much as he used to die. So they're doing better at keeping him alive as well. So I think there's a lot of different factors that are going to Philadelphia. Also the fact that they played Florida Mayhem this week. Also, the fact that Boston played a very bad week.
I think when I mentioned earlier that New York is going to get hit hardest by the meta change, I forgot about Boston. I think that's actually the case for Boston, but we'll get into that maybe later.
Okay, what about this then? Let me ask this before we leave Fusion then. So first of all, when you were saying before that like good tanks were like the key in the Overwatch, you never mentioned anyone who plays for the Fusion, and Fraggy actually was somewhat garbage last season. Meanwhile, it was all those players you were talking about. It was Carpe, who's still a monster. It was Shadowburn, who was had some insane highlights. this was what was succeeding. And there's the other aspect to throw in the mix, which is this. So everyone's saying, right, finally, Mercy's gone, finally. And obviously Neptuno never got that memo. He still brings it out. He's still pretty good with it, right? So are they going to be a rare team, Monty, that still uses the Mercy a bit?
I think all teams are still going to use Mercy, in certain circumstances. What confused me about Boston was that they started off the week against Philadelphia. So we think about that dive has gotten stronger now. But Boston basically played Tracer Soldier or Tracer Widowmaker for most of their time outside of the control map against Philadelphia. And then they switched back to dive against Houston, one of the best anti-dive teams. So their strategy confused me coming out of the gate. It seemed like they were playing towards a weaker part of themselves, trying to have Dream Casper on Soldier and Widow.
To quote one of the first black superheroes, Monty, not Black Panther, believe it or not, it was actually a character called Blade, and he said the immortal words, "Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill."
Exactly.
So that was week one, right?
So I don't really agree with what they were doing strategically versus Philadelphia. And then when they went back to, I think what they were better at, they were playing Houston, which is a pretty bad stylistic mismatch if you're going to be committing to the dive that heavily. So that was weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their magic against Houston was... Yeah, go on.
Does that mean that is Fusion an exception to your theory that the tanks kind of like define how good a team can be, or are they actually in fact going to level off? I mean, obviously they didn't play the hardest schedule, admittedly. Are they not going to be a top team? Where do they fit in that sense?
Well, I think Fraggy, as you mentioned, he struggled in stage one. But I think their flex tanks, whenever they played either Poco or Podba, they played pretty well. I think it's hard to argue, especially Poco in his first 3-4 matches had like 40-something Diva Bomb kills, which is like more than 3 times the amount of any other Diva. So that's obviously insane. And Hoppa, when he played, he looked pretty well too. So I think their flex tanks really played admirably. And Fraggy, I don't think I watched either Philly matches this week, but so I don't know. I can't say how Fraggy did those 2 games, but they 4-0'd Boston, who was a pretty good team last stage. They were fighting for the playoff spot in that final game. So I think Philly might have gotten better as a result of the change, even though obviously, like you mentioned about Boombox.
I think you also just have to say that finally they got a break where they could practice, because remember that this team came in super late, way later than any other team, had basically no time to gel before being thrown right into the season. So if you're one of their coaches, you're basically just trying to hold shit together until you have a break where you can actually, because you can't do any extensive work like changing team communications while you're trying to prepare for matches every 2 matches a week and getting your synergy up to the proper level. So if you can sort of break things down again during the break and try and figure out what exactly the flaws are and work on those when you have a bit more time without the stress of having 2 matches a week, then you can make some of the adjustments. So I think EQO had a very strong start. I think that Fraggy, also the other thing about Fraggy is he can play a lot more Reinhardt now, and he is an excellent Reinhardt player. So, but even on his Winston play, he looked a lot better coming into stage 2. So I think finally they just found the right protection for him to play around his aggressive play style, because Fraggy's one of those players where you're always going to have to play around Fraggy. He's not going to play around you. And other teams in the past that he's been on, like Gigante, figured out how to do that. And I think Philadelphia is finally figuring out how to do that.
Yeah.
Also, they don't even necessarily need Fraggy to perform at a very top level, because they're going to get Sato back. And apparently everybody... So let's talk about Sato. Do you ever play against him in solo queue? Do you hit him on the ladder?
I've run into him on the ladder. He usually duos with I think Carpe, but he's pretty good. He knows how to stay alive. He doesn't feed. Obviously, ranked is very good indication of team play. But I think he's a pretty good player. He's consistently, or whenever I ran into him, he was top 20. He's like 15, whatever. So that's pretty good. I know. When we were scrimming Philly recently, they actually had him in a few times, So what I saw from him, I think he was pretty good. He didn't really feed. He seems like he knows how to stay alive, knows how to not take poke damage before the engage. So I think Sato is going to be a strong addition to the roster.
Okay. And Monty, what do you make of the DPS changer on then? Like, what does this mean for Shadowburn?
Well, I don't know exactly what EQO's hero pool is because he mostly played Genji. It could be that Shadowburn switches to be more of a Pharah player because he's still going to be a very good Pharah. It could be again motivation for him depending on the coaches to get back into form. It's very difficult to tell what is going to happen to Shadowburn based on 1 week of performance from EQO and not knowing exactly what the rest of EQO's hero pool is, although I hear it's pretty broad.
Okay. Much like insert the name of a Hollywood actress, another pretty broad, right? Anyway, what about this then? Since you brought up the Boston Uprising Super, let's just dive right into that one. So obviously after stage 1, Boston had like gotten all this groundswell of support. People were like, wow, what a great job they did. It turned out they did recruit players who worked and were better than we thought they were. And they earned respect. They got that Rodney Dangerfield status. They got the respect they deserved. But now they started out, admittedly, pretty tough teams they're playing. Philadelphia, not the hardest, but okay, good. And then they had to play Outlaws, if we've referenced, very good team. And they've been smashed in both games to some degree. Well, they almost got a point, sort of, against Outlaws, but didn't. What do you make of this Boston Uprising team? Because obviously they're not a team that changed any players, so they're not working in any new players. That's kind of rough. So where do you put them at? Like, were you a believer in them from stage 1?
Yeah. From what I scrimmed them, they were. What I've seen from them in scrims, they're. I thought they were going to do well. People put them last. Obviously, that was not true. I didn't think that. But when you look at so they played Philly, week 5, and they beat them 4-0. In their first match of the week. And then if you go to stage 2, week 1, they lost 4-0. Literally a complete flip.
Yeah.
So obviously something had to have happened there. And the meta changed. Obviously Mercy's out. And I know that when they ran Mercy, a lot of what they did with Mercy was they put it onto Dreamcasper. They pocketed him with the Mercy beam. And obviously that gives you a lot more freedom to do what you want. There was res available. You could overextend a little more because you had a Mercy beam, you could do more damage. It was hard for them to really kill you. But now that they take that away, I think Boston is having struggles trying to play without a Mercy. And it's showing. They got 4-0'd by a team they 4-0'd 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And even like you mentioned, it was Philly. They might have had time to actually prepare for some things. But it did not look too good for them in that recent match against Philly.
What happened to him, Monty? What happened to the Boston Uprising?
I think that Dreamcasper was, by the end of the stage, exhibiting some extremely good games, but a lot of that came on Pharah. So I think, as I said before, their strategy coming into the Philly game seemed to be him playing long-range hit scan, which I don't think is his best. Especially that Soldier didn't really inspire me too much. I think they also sort of had an off week. Striker, even on the Tracer, was impressing me way less than he did.
The DPS also got killed a fuck ton in all these games.
Yeah. So I think that it could have just been a perfect storm of Dreamcasper and Striker having a very bad week. I assume they're going to come back because some of the performances we were seeing from Dreamcasper and especially Striker were amazing at the end of last stage. So I need more data on this one because their strategy, as I alluded to earlier, wasn't necessarily clear coming in, and then trying to play dive into the Outlaws maybe wasn't the brightest idea. So that combined with some underwhelming DPS performances just could have been just a bad week for them.
Well, next week they play New York, which is going to be tough for them, I think. And they play Florida, so I guess we'll see.
Chance to get a win against Florida.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think.
Come on.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was just saying, I think New York's going to be a hard game for them, but yeah.
Depends on if Arc is in or not, right?
Oh yeah, true. If Arc is. About that.
Is Boston a team that will be negatively hit by the Mercy meta?
Yeah.
Dying.
Yeah.
Why?
Like Monty mentioned, they had a lot of Pharah. And Pharah is still going to be good with Pharah Mercy, obviously. But Valk also incredibly strong ability. But I just don't see how Boston is, because like I also mentioned, they put a lot of their mercy, like how I mentioned with New York, a lot of the mercy was with Jonak. With Boston, a lot of the mercy was with Dreamcasper. And without that, he seemed to overextend and kind of maybe forget how to play without a mercy. So I think it'll take some getting used to, but once they get past that initial hump,
Yes.
I think they might get back to form. But right now, they didn't look too strong, especially against Houston in their stage 2, because Houston, the took before the game, or they played them in their last week, the last match of the week before the playoffs. They took them to a game 5,
Yes.
but this week they got 4-0.
So Monty, this is one of the reasons, beyond like hating Mercy anyway, and people like saying, obviously it's like half a meme, like, you know, it's so easy to play, blah, blah, blah. Right? Another reason why people wanted it out of the meta is because it did have a weird effect on all the DPS players in the league. Like, without a Mercy, I mean, here's the thing, wouldn't you expect some DPS are just never going to be popping off in the way they were in the first stage? So it's going to separate the men from the boys, right?
It depended on how the teams were playing. So some teams would damage boost, say, their Widowmakers and make DPS players look perhaps a bit better than they would otherwise. Some teams like New York would DPS Jonak, their Zenyatta, and make them look better than they would otherwise. So there was a certain amount of boosting that was going on. It also meant that the player to make a first mistake. So if you look at a lot of those Widow duels, okay, well, one player wins a Widow duel, but then that Widowmaker on the enemy team is immediately resurrected. And if that player comes back and then takes out 2 players, all of a sudden they're looking really good. But in normal Overwatch, without all those reses, that player would just be dead and that team would win. So the first strike means a lot more now than it used to. Because there is no do-over button. Basically, Mercy was a giant eraser. She just erased mistakes, and now they're being punished again, which is how the game should be played, because it's more interesting that way, not to have a sick headshot suddenly just be like somebody pushes one button and then it's gone. But also because it slows down the game a lot. If you get picked as you're coming into a point or at the start of a fight, you have to go back and regroup. You can't just like res and then recommit and make the fights last forever. Especially with Valkyrie being involved in them. Okay. So now we have I think a better game where you have a commit, you commit to a fight. If it works or if you get picked off, you have to come back and reset. So there's more downtime now. There's more interesting like play calling that's going on, and you have to be more committed. So as for the DPS, so some of the players on some of the teams will be more affected depending on how that team played around the Mercy.
Okay, then the obvious question, would any of you dare to venture some people who might not be as good as they were last stage, perhaps because of the consequence of their team, perhaps because of their own play, as DPS player? Who do you think might be hit the most by this?
Probably the Shanghai DPS players are going to, unfortunately, take a big...
basically all that team had.
Exactly, because they were just sitting there like damage beaming undead constantly. Who else do I think? New York, because of Jonak having less of an effect.
Yeah.
I think those teams that relied heavily on Pharah play, so Boston would be one of them, even though it's still viable to run Mercy with the Pharah, it's not as good as it used to be, particularly in team fights.
Any other Korean teams? Oh, you said New York already. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that about it then?
I think that's probably about it.
Okay.
I know Fleta got a lot of Mercy Pocket, but I don't think Fleta's going to fall off. I don't think he did. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think he's going to be fine.
Like, did you make the point that you were going to make about Boston? I've forgotten. I can't remember what it was, the original one that you said we'd talk about that later. Do you remember?
It was about the lack of mercy with them.
Oh, it was. Okay, right. No, then we've addressed that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, let's move on then. So how about we talk about, I mean, we can get this one done pretty quickly. Okay, Florida Mayhem did add some players, Monty, and one of them we know is a good player. They added Sire player. They've also got Awesome Guy as a tank. Right, what do you make of these changes? Because obviously this was a team that was just fucking depressing to talk about every week because they had no options, couldn't change any players. They had the same team, which was dysfunctional. They had issues in terms of what they were going to do with someone like, in terms of the DPS players, they had no choices, obviously. They had to, it was just like everyone just, in fact, I actually feel like Logic's half of the shit people gave him was just because they didn't want to say anything about Tavik. They just wanted to be like, well, I can only talk shit on one person, so unlucky, mate. You know what I mean? So what do these changes do, Monty? Does it boost the team enough?
So they got 2 players from Meta Athena. So Saya Player and Awesome Guy. These are people who used to play with Libero. Saya Player, for those who don't know, is a hit scan player, mostly known for his McCree and Widowmaker, to a lesser degree his Tracer. So I'm not sure if he's going to fully replace Logix in this lineup, especially since Logix slowly has been improving to his form that we used to see him in when he played online. Awesome Guy never really impressed me as a tank when he was on LW. So I'm not entirely sure where they're going with that. He's decent, but not spectacular. So I don't really know how much these signings are going to affect them. Now, I haven't seen either of these players play in a while, so I could be like, my data's pretty old.
I mean, Logix was pretty good in the game against, was it Philly? I think it was Philly that he
he's been playing a lot better recently.
Okay. What do you think, Super? Do you know anything about any of these players?
Well, they also added Zappis, but that was a little bit ago.
Yes.
I don't know if he's here yet. I don't think
think he is.
So, I think honestly, all these players are going to make like pretty substantial upgrades. Well, maybe not for, because like you mentioned, Logix has been playing better recently, but
so they also added a coach too, which is Ryder, and Ryder is like an original Overwatch player in Korea. He started out on MIG Frost and then went to Kongdu and then transitioned into coaching. So he is coming. He used to coach Meta Athena, so he is coming with Saya Player and with Awesome Guy from Meta Athena. So they have 3 people, and I think that they're going to do very well because all they had was Mineral before. So you look at a lot of these other teams, and they have much more extensive coaching staff. Like you have 3 coaches, for example. They just had Mineral. They had 6 players at Mineral. So I think getting the additional perspective will certainly be helpful. I think Zappis just, even if he doesn't play, I think Zappis just as sort of a locker room, as it were, leader is a valuable addition to this team.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
But as a team, though, they did start out and they did still get their heads kicked in. I mean, they're not going to be a good team, right?
I think they may win a couple more matches, but they probably need to continue upgrading. Again, when we look at all of these signings, we have to remember that the signing window is not closed. So any team can still make additions to their roster, and maybe Florida's looking into that.
Yeah.
Oh, look, my plan for the Florida Mayhem was just to literally sign Runaway and then bench all of their other players. That was my idea.
They didn't listen to that plan. Right? Okay, so here's the thing, okay. I saw that Swoosh did do an interview where he said some line like, you know, everyone thought we just prepared for the intros. It's like, that was facetious, mate. The reason we said that is because no one knows what the fuck you were doing. Like, I mean, here's the thing. You want me to go the other way? Okay, you were trying your hardest. That was who you are. Great. Enjoy the rest of your life battling the Shanghai Dragons for worst team and ever playing the Overwatch League. Sound. What would you want from me? That's all I can do, right? It's not good, is it? It's not a good state of affairs. You should have played into it. Yeah, obviously that's all we were doing. But now we've got Sire play, you know, everything's got serious. The new coaches come in. Now we're rejuvenated. Believe in us, we are the Florida Mayhem.
Yeah. I have to say that does not make him look good when you
Does it?
You could turn it around that easily.
Right, let me think. Okay, I think we've only got 3 more teams to do, right? So let's do this one quickly. So Shanghai Dragons, in fact, you won't believe this, Monty. We were talking a lot of hypotheticals of what they might be able to do and players they could sign. Turned out they actually signed all those players, believe it or not. Like, even though it was purely a hypothetical scenario, you could not have known. You have no inside info, remember? And I didn't know either. I've just read some reports, and I'm often told esports journalists just lie and make everything up. But again, you know, like majority of the time, it turned out exactly what they said would happen happened. So, right, what is the situation with these players coming in? Like, do you actually think that this is going to change something? I mean, something has to change anyway in Shanghai. They're obviously weren't in a great scenario anyway.
Look, I think that they are upgrading on need positions. So Xu Fanjun, whose name is now Sky, I guess, is... I haven't seen as much of him play. Hexagrams has cast a lot of China, and he thinks that this is a massive upgrade. I think bringing in people like Geguri and Fearless are the right moves because...
Is it known when they actually get to join the team, though?
I assume whenever they get their visas completed.
Right,
yeah, probably like
scenario for them,
3 to 4 weeks, probably.
Okay.
So I think that if you look at Shanghai, their biggest needs were tanks and supports. They got some good tanks and supports. So I think absolutely they should be doing better unless the Korean-Chinese language barrier causes problems.
Okay. I heard from someone, I don't know who, but apparently they communicate in English. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard. I don't know who I heard that from, but that's what I heard. So
it's also possible that some of the Korean players might know some Chinese because they were taught it in school. So you can never count that factor out. I read in an interview that they were planning on communicating in Chinese and teaching the Korean players the Chinese. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I remember someone told me that, and so that's...
Obviously, the joke was it was quicker to teach the Korean players Chinese rather than have the Chinese players learn how to play Overwatch. There's the joke, right? Ha 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 ha. But anyway, that's the end of that joke. The jokes. See, that literally was a 2-minute joke segment about Shanghai Dragons, but that's pretty much all they deserve in the league at the moment.
Until they get those players, I think it's hard to discuss them. But I do think they targeted the right areas of need. So we'll just see how it goes, I guess.
Okay. So now we'll get a team that we can talk about. It used to be in this pack of teams, Monty, the depressing end of the Overwatch League. But actually, we can talk about them in a vaguely positive manner. It's the Dallas Fuel. They got young XQC back. He's back. They got, obviously, a new player. Who was it they got in their team?
They got 2 players.
Rascal.
They got
and
AKM and Rascal. So these are some pretty good additions. I mean, XQC obviously was already on the team. He didn't play for obvious reasons. So this is actually a pretty good roster on paper.
I just feel so bad for their coach, Kai, because he has basically never been able to field his entire roster, even now, because apparently Chips Hyan was like sick this week or something. So it's been XQC's been banned. Players were sick or ineligible to play. So he hasn't even been able to play with the full deck of cards like that. He
had a nice schedule for the first week at least. He caught a break there, Monty, because obviously they played Shanghai, they played Gladiators. So obviously we're just speculating here. What do you think of Dallas Fuel overall?
So I think that finally they have a top tier Genji player so that they can play dive with Effects Tracer. So that is a huge upgrade. Okay. They finally have a top tier soldier player who's not Harry Hook, who they need to play support. So that's a nice addition to the roster too, because Taimu was never really cutting it as a soldier player. I don't think it was one of his weaker heroes that he had. So I think they have a lot more flexibility in the DPS role. So those are good choices. They have a top tier Pharah player in AKM as well. They were lacking previously. So is Taimu going to move to tank permanently? I'm not sure. If I had to venture a guess, Coco was really underperforming, and they probably need some sort of backup in case XQC does something that gets him suspended again.
There was a news post, Monty, and it said Seagull is learning D.Va. I think Seagull's job is just learn whatever hero they need next. They go, give me a go. And then they go, okay, there you go. Right, okay, we got to recruit someone who plays that role. Like, come on, what are you learning next? Oh, bloody hell, what? I'm on Moira now.
I think they need a backup. Seagull was always a pretty good Zarya player, so if he can learn D.Va, I think that maybe they just need a backup to Mickey just in case something happens to Mickey, because Dallas has had a huge amount of problems with players not being able to play. So having backups in those roles is pretty critical for them. So I think they look better is the answer. I think XQC played very well against the Gladiators. Yeah, I think that if he is capable mentally and emotionally of not fucking up, then he will be a great starting tank for that team.
Yeah, I think once they saw the way XQC play, I don't think Taimu is going to stay on main tank. I don't see why they would do that, because he played pretty well. And I've always said, like, even back when they were Envious, I always thought the best part of Dallas, or former Envious, whatever, even Dallas now, was their support. I think Harry Hook and Chips are actually just incredible. I think Harry Hook's probably one of the best players in the game. I don't think there's much to argue that. If you see how he plays, see what he can play, see what he brings to a team when he plays versus when he doesn't, I think he's just phenomenal. And obviously, They made some upgrades, ACAM and Rascal, to the DPS positions. Now they have more flexibility. They can play things that they formerly couldn't play as well. So I think yeah, they did pretty well in the signings. They got better.
I think that Mickey's style and XQC's style are better suited to each other than Mickey with Coco.
Yeah.
I think that whenever I watch them play, it looks like there's a lot stronger synergy between Mickey and XQC. Mm-hmm. So, and also, I think that the reason why Dallas made these roster maneuvers was that they sometimes lacked communication on that team. And Custa, so the vocal players on that roster are Taimu, XQC, and Custa. And there were times when 0 out of 3 of these players were in these games.
Yeah.
So who was communicating on that team? Because as good as Harry and Chips are, they're not very talkative as people.
Right.
And I think they really needed somebody with the strong shot calling, or at least the initiative to go in. And so by moving Taimu to tank and having XQC also as tank, they were ensuring that even whether it's Taimu or XQC, there will always be a vocal player in the team, right, which makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think when they play without those 3, I think they had Siegel doing a lot of the calling, is what I would assume, because I know he calmed on NRG. So when none of those players were there and he was playing the Junkrat, Pharah, Genji occasionally, I think he would do the calling. But yeah, obviously, it's good that they have XQC back, because I think he's pretty good as a tank player. I played against him a lot before Overwatch League, when he was on his team with Custa and Dante, and I had my team. I think he's good. So I think overall they're going to do a lot better now that they finally have all their players, all their pieces together. They should be performing better in this stage, and they already are. They already won 2 games. So
okay. Right, I want to ask now about the LA Gladiators, because they did make a change. They were obviously another team that was pretty short-staffed. They brought in Fisher, who was previously on, I mean, that was Spitfire as well, right? Yeah,
right.
Also a Spitfire player. Right, Gladiators, aside from the odd win and a lot of close games, a lot of people thought they were kind of underwhelming in Stage 1. What do you make of this team, Super?
Well, I think the addition of Fisher is good. I don't think Remix was bad, but I just think Fisher is better. Although Remix and Bishu had that synergy from Kongarna, they were the tank duo, they played together for a long time. But it appears that Fisher is doing well, so I don't think the only position.
I mean, there are a ton of maps already where Fisher was literally leading the team in eliminations and final blows. Like, he was actually just like doing way better than so the DPS or the Diva, which you expect to have a lot of eliminations just because she just shoots like some pellets at somebody and gets like a fraction of a kill. But Fisher was like leading in final blows as well. So this guy is an absolute monster.
Right. And I think you maybe will see Remix on Rhine, but I think the overall Fisher is going to get all the play time. I don't know. I think it's a possibility, but I'm not sure.
I don't think we're ever going to see Remix again.
He needs to remix the Zero format. If he does that, then maybe.
A Remix's position.
Right, here's the thing. Even though Fisher is a good player, this surely isn't going to be a good team.
I just don't think the DPS have really stepped up. I think we look at Shaz and Big Goose, and they were the bright spots of the roster before, but the DPS really hasn't been there. Asher is not, he's very mediocre. Surefour, at least I think, played better this week compared to Stage 1, and Hydration is flexible, but they just don't have a star power punch at the DPS position. Maybe Surefour can get back into that form, but you think about the ceiling of this team and what can really move for them, and they had some decent synergy already, or decent coordination before this last week, where they did encounter some problems with their tanks were overcommitting, but I think that's just because Fisher was new. But I don't really know where is the playmaking potential. Like, at least you have some with Fisher and you've got some with Shaz and Big Goose, but where's the star DPS? I don't think it exists here. I just don't know where it comes from.
So they need to get Rascal instead.
I think all of those players have their moments, though. Like Asher, Surefour, and Hydration, that is. I think they've all had moments where they pop off and they really take the team over, but I agree that they don't exactly have a, like a Fleta, for example. But I think they'll be better, but I don't know if it's in the conversation for top 6, maybe, but we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens.
By the way, Monty, I just saw this on his Wikipedia page for Rascal, but you know when Kongdu Panthera was in Apex, why did they have those uniforms where the top of it looks just like the uniforms that schoolgirls have in anime? I think they're sailor suits. They're sailor suits. Mate, that looks just like the little the fucking top that all those girls always have in the anime.
No. They're like sailor suits. They had the. You remember the jumpsuits they had in season 1? They had those. Yeah, they definitely had some interesting uniform ideas.
Right, okay, how about we do this? Okay, at the end we'll talk about the patch change, but first of all, let's quickly do this. Let's just predict all of next week's matches. This week's, technically. Okay, so I'll ask the matchup, tell me who's going to win. If you want, give a reason. Seoul versus Dallas Fuel is the first game. Super, who wins this game?
Seoul.
Any particular reason?
I think it's their meta, and they're probably one of the best, if not the best team right now.
Monty, who do you think?
I agree with Seoul for the same reasons. I think this is their meta, and even though Dallas has improved, so has Seoul, so it's not going to be so easy.
Okay, right, Monty, I'll go first with you on this one. Valiant versus San Francisco Shock.
I think Shock actually have a shot at this matchup. I was so underwhelmed by the way the Valiant played, but I think Valiant will take it. I think they'll settle in with a more consistent roster and strategies after a week of their coaching turmoil, and I think Shock has got to get some more players in there. Got to get some more players.
Okay. Super, who's going to win this one?
Well, obviously, Shock. It's not good.
I did see that guy who's the... sometimes people translate that guy who's one of the Korean commentators, his thoughts onto Reddit, which I like, actually. He has some interesting ones. But I did see in there, he had some weird comment where he actually said that Shock's going to be an amazing team this stage.
Yes, he did.
Which makes it just sound like some Korean team was like, yeah, they're practicing with us a lot. They're doing a really good job. Throw him a fucking bone. He's like, yeah, okay, well, here we go. Here's the PR announcement. What's that about? What is there some secret scrum results that we're not aware of?
I guess you have to see, right?
Or maybe not. Maybe I'll just start
maybe not.
What that guy fucking said again. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I just wondered. Okay. So Gladiators play Shanghai Dragons.
Gladiators. Just move on.
Florida Mayhem plays London.
Just move on.
Yeah.
No hope. Okay. So here's one. The Houston Outlaws play the Philadelphia Fusion.
This one is really interesting, actually. What are the maps for this?
This might be the best match of the week.
This is going to be Volskaya, Nepal, Hollywood, and
Route 66. I like this for Houston because they have 2 Sombra maps, and I think that they've shown their strength with their Sombra play. So I would give them an edge here because they do have we've seen Banny play it, we've seen Raucus play it. And Raucus has always been a very good Sombra player, so I think this map pool favors Houston. So I'm going to push it over to them.
I'm a little wary about Outlaws on Volskaya because even in their stomp out victory against Boston, that was a really close map on Volskaya. So I don't know if they're struggling with Volskaya because they also had those same struggles against London.
They played Hanamura against Boston.
Oh, did they? Oh, okay. It's my fault then.
But they did lose Volskaya to London, but it was very close.
So, perhaps I think this goes to Game 5, no matter who wins it. But I'm gonna say Fusion wins this one. I think.
Okay.
Even
Any
though
factors on the Fusion side.
So, do you think the Fusion is the best Western team? Then is the next question.
Well, I mean, how many Koreans do they have on their roster? They have a few, at least, right? They have a few at least. So, I don't know. I think there could be a case for it to be made for Philly to be the best Western team right now.
Okay. Now, New York Excelsior plays Boston Uprising.
New York.
Yeah.
As long as Arc is playing, I think New York will be able to take this. Based on Boston not even winning a map last week, I think they may have hit a wall.
Okay. Well, if they hit a wall, then the pick-me-up is the very next game. Boston versus Florida Mayhem.
Ooh. If Boston continues to play at that level, Florida might actually have a shot.
I'm going to say Florida's going to win this one, I think. I think Florida
I'm not going to go that far. So the thing is with our predictions for Watchpoint and stuff, we don't make predictions off of the last 2 days. So until we get a chance to see the teams once that week. So usually I wait to make these predictions. But there is a possibility. I want to see if Boston is still going to be in the same form they were in last week. Because if they are, I do think Florida can win.
I think if they play the same way that they played last week, I think Florida wins this game.
Is Soul versus Gladiators a foregone conclusion?
Yes.
Almost, yeah.
Right. What about this one then? Dallas Fuel versus the Valiant.
I think Dallas can win this one.
Yeah. Dallas is on the up, and Valiant looked like they were on the down. Now, granted, they might have... I don't know how much time they had to prepare with Carib on DPS before their first matches, because I don't remember exactly when Cuddles was no longer part of the team. I don't know if it was immediately after stage 1 or it was a couple of days after, and then the new coach came in and made those changes. So hopefully they've had more time to get their roster gelled together with Curve on DPS. But
even if that's true, the Valiant have objectively worse DPS. It's Effect versus Soon on Tracer, and then there's Rascal and AKM versus Agility, Silk Thread, and Kariv.
Yeah, Rascal... I've honestly, even though he didn't get much play time, and it's a pretty unpopular opinion, I always thought Rascal was like the best DPS on London. Well, at least on Genji. I don't know about his other heroes too much, but his Genji, I think, was better than anyone else on London.
To be fair, we didn't see much Hureg, and Hureg was the primary Genji player for GC Busan, so...
Yeah.
Okay. Right, what about this one? Philadelphia Fusion versus London.
Do we come down on that one? I think Dallas is going to win. I think that if XQC plays, and then I think that if we see Harry Hook and Chips return, then I think Dallas is shaping up to be maybe a top 5 team this stage.
Yeah, okay. I think Dallas can win that.
So Fusion versus Spitfire.
I think this is a very winnable match for Fusion, but London is so... They're so mercurial because they lose dub matches they should win, but then when push comes to shove, they are very consistent in clutching out some of these important matches. So I think
that goes to a game 5 too. I think that might be a game 5, Philly versus London. Well, let me look at the maps. Hold up. It is
Hanamura, Nepal, Hollywood, Route 66. I also wonder if they're going to play Hagapun again. This is why it's so hard, because I want to know whether they play Hagapun against Florida before I would make a prediction on this.
Right.
Or if they go closer with Bedoshin. Because those are the questions for me.
I want to say London wins this.
I think London's going to win this because I think London is going to prep very heavily for Philly because they have to play Florida as well, and Philly has to play both Houston and London. So I think London's going to put 90% of their prep time into this match, and they'll be really ready.
Right. Yeah, I think London wins, but it won't be easy. It'll definitely be close, I think. I think it still might go to a game 5, but we'll see what happens.
Okay. And then we have Houston Outlaws versus New York Excelsior.
Again, depends on if ARC is playing or not. Map pool is... it's Volskaya and Route 66 again. So here's the question mark that I have about New York. So because Volskaya and Route 66 are so good with Sombra, who is the Sombra player on New York? I don't know who it is. Is it Jonak? I've never seen it. Is it one of their DPS? Is it Libero? I don't know who plays that role on New York, and I also don't know how good they are at playing with Sombra because it's just not something they've done. So to have 2 Sombra maps here, I think is really hard for New York when Houston is proven with their Sombra play.
Yeah, that'll be hard. I would assume Libero, but I'm not sure because... Yeah,
I have no idea.
That'll be hard.
And also, Kings Row is in this pool, and Houston has been mega dominant on Kings Row.
Yeah, they might win. Yeah, I think this could be a Houston win, actually.
I think Houston can win here.
And I think, even though they lost Li Zhang against London in stage 1. It was pretty close, right? Went to all 3 maps.
Yeah, they were never terrible at Lijiang. They were just terrible at Oasis and Ilios.
Houston can win this, but I think it's just because I don't know if New York would even play Sombra. I mean, I think they should, but I don't know who would do it.
Okay, and then the last game is Shanghai Dragons versus Shock. So we'll just say Shock wins that one. There we go. Saved the best to last. Gave you a little out. Right, so do you want to discuss the patch change at the end now, Monty?
Sure. I think so. The patch just dropped right before we started recording this, and
yeah, like 2 minutes before.
Oh, your camera went off, by the way, Super.
Oh shit. Let me fix that.
I guess the hack change, the hack cast time is actually huge because it looks small, 0.8 to 0.65 seconds, but even that 0.15 second difference is actually massive. What are you doing there, buddy? There, you fixed it.
Okay,
right.
So there's a few things that happen. So you don't gain ult charge from health packs, and we're not going to see the same strategies of just trying to farm EMPs. But hacking is faster now if you just right click, and it's also going to be more effective because it stops Genji from double jumping and wall climbing, stops Hanzo from wall climbing, stops Pharah from hover jets, so she just falls out of the sky basically. It stops Lucio from healing or speed boosting at all, so not even just like the amp it up, but like turns off the song, and he can't wall ride, so he becomes actually just a turd. And then Mercy can't shift, but can't like glide between people. So it removes all the.
She's more of a DPS player now than like a DPS support, because before it was just farm the packs, but now you can actually do a little more and get a little more hands-on.
Well,
especially because the spread.
You can still farm the pack for healing.
Right.
So what didn't change is that the packs still spawn faster.
Yeah.
So even though it's not giving her ult charge, they still spawn at the same rate. So you're still getting megas up with every 4 seconds, I believe, 4 or 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And you also previously. Diva was just horrible when she got hacked. But now there's a bunch of other shit that happened.
I didn't read this. Enemy health bars are now invisible when health drops below 100%.
Yes. So you can see everybody
That's
now.
actually a perma wall hack.
Yes, it is.
That's a little crazy, actually.
So does this mean everyone will play Sombra now?
I think Sombra might be I could see triple DPS coming back with this, actually. I could see like a Genji Tracer, because I mean...
You lose one of your supports and you play this instead.
Yeah, I don't... This is a little tough.
Also, she's more accurate now, too.
Yeah, the spread is... So if you have good aim...
I have not tested the spread to see what the spread reduced from 3 to 2.7 actually means, but should be... I'm not sure how much...
It's a little bit tighter. A little bit tighter. Also, I think Pharah is going to have a hard time, too, because that hack is, like, instant. It's really quick.
Yeah,
so you can like translocate up in the air and then hack a Pharah out of the air, and she just drops like a rock, and you can just kill her because she
can't hit. She can't. So the thing that interrupts the hack is damage, and if you just fly into the air like you're saying, there's no way she's going to hit you before you.
Yeah, she has to hit. She has
a travel time with a rocket.
She has to hit the air shot, so she has to pre-fire the air shot, which is hard. So. Sombra looks really strong right now. I didn't realize, and they also increased her translocator from 15 to 20 seconds. Wow.
So crazy. She can. What that means basically is that she has 5 additional seconds to recall.
To run around. Yeah.
After she throws it.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, these are a lot of buffs. So not as many EMPs, but the EMPs are definitely going to be more impactful, and shutting down these mobility. I mean, it's actually like
some of these EMPs are going to be like game winners, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't even heal as Lucio anymore. Like, you actually can't heal anybody.
That seems. I don't know how I feel about that. That seems a little bit. What do you do with you? All you have is just your stupid gun that does like 20 damage. It's you can't even right click when you're hacked.
And hacking is easier now too. So what this means also is that Sombra has to be focused instantly, because if somebody's not shooting her, how fast she can hack people is crazy.
Yep.
And that just like if she can hack, because even the heroes that didn't get any more effects from this, like Tracer, a hack Tracer is horrible because she can't dies instantly because she has no movement abilities, no recall. So the ability to hack the Tracer faster now means that you have even less time to deal damage to the Sombra who's trying to hack anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's rough.
And I know with hack, the way it works is like they make it like somewhat work around walls and like somewhat through shields. If like you start the hack and then you round a corner, or then like a shield appears to make it like less clunky, so you can like small things don't break your hack. But now it's like you can abuse that mechanic of like trying to make it more like easier to use. Because you can like start the hack and then literally turn a corner instantly, and then like the hack still goes off as like a function to not make hacks seem like it's hard to use. It's like it's basically a quality of life thing, and then now it turns into like part of her kit because the hack is so quick. Like it's kind of hard to explain into words, but if you like test it out, like start a hack and then go behind a wall, you'll see what I mean. It's a little. This is really big buffs for Sombra.
Okay.
Yeah,
she's Monty.
No, there's the Mei changes too, which actually are interesting.
Which I saw. Okay, people played it a little bit, right? But is this going to make Mei more in the meta?
So the alternate fire ammo cost reduction is nothing. Like there was never a situation where you were running out of your clip on right-clicking as Mei. So that's kind of whatever. Yes. But the freeze slow duration increase from 1 second to 1.5 seconds is very important. Because when Mei is now on a cart or on the points, like guarding a cart, if you're a tank and on that cart, it's so irritating to deal with Mei because D.Va can't block the Mei freeze with their defense matrix. So you are going to get hit by it. And having that extra half second of slow makes your life really challenging if you're going to be on the payload. That's
like the worst thing when you play Rhine, because if you get like touched by one little freeze, like one particle of the freeze or whatever, and you put up your shield, you just stop. You literally cannot move as Ryan, and that extra half second is going to be actually a pain in the ass to deal with.
Yeah, that's actually people may not understand, but I think that's actually going to be a pretty important buff.
Yeah, and
because it's going to make her objective control super strong.
Right, and Doomfist got a very slight buff. Well,
that's also no. That's actually a pretty important buff because remember that buff actually snowballs because if you shoot all of your ammo, you now get it back that much faster,
right?
Because it's not like you'll get. So if you shoot all of your ammo consecutively, obviously it'll take the time that it took to shoot that, but in essence, you're getting a 0.15 second buff for every bullet that you shoot. So it ends up being probably about half a second in total once you take. Well, maybe a little bit less once you take out the amount of time it takes to shoot. But the ammo recovery rate actually makes him significantly more threatening at range.
I think that's the most... I like that because when you play Doomfist, it's really kind of annoying when you... I guess it's part of like management, but you like use your abilities and then you use your left click and you're kind of just like... And nothing's firing, you know?
Yeah.
It's definitely going to make Doomfist feel better to play, which is nice. Because I think it's really situational.
I think he will see more play as a result of this. Probably not a lot more, but more. Especially for players that like to play Doomfist, like Hydration or Dreamcasper or Effect. They might. I think players that already play Doomfist will be more likely to use Doomfist as a result of this. I'm not sure that players who don't currently play Doomfist are going to start playing Doomfist as a result.